executive committee from the end of the day to start out the meeting, and going back and reading the minutes, I had failed to recognize that at the last meeting it was approved that I could go ahead and appoint the committees, which we'll ratify tomorrow. But the executive committee includes the officers and the past president, past chair, and so that's Don Royston, Casey Stewart, Trey Watkins, and myself. But pleased that others can join us today. You've seen the agenda for the executive committee. In order to accommodate Brian's schedule, shall we start off with the financial results and the budget? Wendy, do you want to start out with that, and Brian?
Sure. Am I speaking into the? Okay. Oh, okay. Okay, so I think the best document to pull up first is your FY15 financial results. And I believe you've got 3 documents here. The first one shows you FY15 actual results and your prior 3 fiscal year results and how we ended up. The second page gives a brief synopsis of the cost backs, and then the final page is my discussion of the various line items. So I can go through and talk about these, and then we'll let Brian talk a little bit about the cost backs. Okay. The gross revenue for FY15 was 4% less than projected, and roughly 6% less than the prior year. You will note that the FY15 was the first year that we recognized a lower renewal fee. So we were expecting a lower revenue number. It was 4% less than projected. So it came in a little bit less than we had anticipated, even knowing that the license renewal fees would be less. So we are continuing to take a look at exactly where if that's going to continue or not. The state regulatory fee, that is a fee that's charged, that the board is charged each year for all. I wrote this I've asked several questions in order to get a full understanding of the regulatory fee. So I believe what I've put here is slightly inaccurate, but it is a $10 fee for all individuals who renew during the fiscal year. So the number that you see in my explanations of $7,856 is the correct number that we were charged for. So that would be all active renewals. That would be all reciprocal renewals. That would be any initial licenses, anything where someone paid money to obtain a license during that year, whether through renewal or through an initial application. So it's $10 per for those 7,800, and then for each firm license, we are charged $5, and there were approximately 2,200 firm licenses for that year. Now you'll notice that the gosh, I don't have it in this document. The other document on your iPad, let's see. I'm going to open up the FY17 budget. You will see the budget from 2015 as well. And it just gives you, let's see, a sense of where we were actual against budget. And that regulatory fee was budgeted to be $62,000, where it was an actual fee of $89,000. So I'm not exactly sure what happened in the budgeting process there, if it was how that came to be, but we were a variance there of $30,000. Let's see. Salaries were pretty in line, not quite as high as projected due to some personnel changes throughout the year, and no salary increase. Travel was less than projected due to some staffing changes, and NASBA events were a little less expensive based on their location over the year. Printing and duplicating that was moved to communications, and we shouldn't see any more expenses in the printing duplicating area. Third-party professional services, you'll notice that was quite a bit less than the prior year. That covers shredding services, expenses incurred from formal hearings, our NASBA dues, calligraphy services, credit card processing fees, and any other third-party related items. So that item was lower than expected and lower than the prior year. We had no formal hearings throughout this fiscal year, which is a little abnormal. We usually are able to get a few in. Employee training, let's see, came in pretty much as expected. Computer-related items, we were lower than expected there. Simply just didn't need much in terms of those types of things. State professional services is another one of our greatest expenditures. That covers our telephone bill, the rent allocation, state printing services, leases on the cars that the investigators drive, fuel, etc. And then I think we get down to the last item, which is the cost backs for the year, which you will notice came in a little over $100,000 more than the prior year. So I'm going to let Brian talk a little bit about that.
It's great to be back in front of y'all again. Sorry, I'm a little under the weather, so if I sound a little stopped up, that's why. But yeah, so we want to just kind of let you kind of know how we get to the cost back, just how we get to that number, and we factor in three percentages, kind of the whole cost. We start with a percentage of the spending plan, percentage of number of complaints, and percentage of number of licensees. So we average that. That gives us a percentage that we have that we'll use for the total cost related to cost backs for the year. And so the biggest reason we see, you'll see here from your all's increase, and actually just to kind of give you some philosophical thought behind that, one of the reasons that what the cost back does is really help try to prevent significant variances from year to year. The way the formula works is it maintains consistency. So you typically won't have wide-ranging swings. This particular year, as I said, one of the factors in that in the formula relates to complaints, and your all's complaint number this year tripled from the previous. That increase has pretty significantly affected kind of the overall amount of your cost back. And just to give you an idea, if you were consistent in your cost back, if you were consistent in your complaints from the previous year, you would have had a $249,000 total cost back versus the $314,000. So the significant increase that change. There's one additional tweak that we've made in relation to this. Legal in the past has been calculated. We have it. Administration of legal is calculated one way, and we had been counting some legal staffing salary distribution through a way that was our staff was kind of estimating time used and time time spent on particular subject matters, and that process, we needed something more definitive, more predictable, that's not quite as subjective from the process. And so we've employed the cost back formula over all of legal expenses. And so as a result of that, you all were actually getting based on all of the programs, you all were seeing a little bit of a deal in terms of what all the programs were seeing in legal costs. So your legal cost generally is bumped up a little bit because of that. But like I said, those are the two main reasons. The largest reason is the change to the significant increase in complaints from the previous year.
When I first saw this, my concern was, the significant increase in cost backs as compared to last year. And when you compare our expenses against those that were budgeted and fiscal 14, generally at or below, and the cost backs was a driving force behind us coming up with a deficit for the first time, at least in my memory. So I raised questions with Wendy and eventually Brian, how this happened and what we do about it going forward. The cost backs are really out of our control to some degree. It's based upon the complaints and thought it would be helpful, and Brian volunteered to come and discuss it with us, and so
the additional complaints were largely driven by the P10 match. Is that
Prepared, if you look on your iPads at complaints report 2015. And the top section here indicates how many complaints were open and then how many complaints we had closed. I don't have a comparison on here as to the complaints we had last year, but we had less than 100 in the previous fiscal year opened. And we had opened 199 in 2015. So I actually went through the past 5 years, and in all but 1 year was under 100. So we did see a significant increase. Then of those 199, we closed 110. And I know that's not your question, Don. The next section is those dismissal or the disposition of those, but the bottom shows you the type of complaint that was opened of those 199. How many were professional privilege tax, unlicensed activity, due professional care. We coded them the best that we could.
well, the unlicensed activity that's where your P10 number complaints.
Correct.
So we've got of the
They're legitimate.
roughly 90 or roughly 100 extra complaints this year, and 80 of them were P10 probably. Is that?
There's legitimate unlicensed activity in there,
Yeah.
But yeah, a significant
Primarily.
number of those are the P10.
I'm just looking at budgets going forward and
Right.
all, and that was an anomaly that I still can't figure out why the P10 organization, it's called P10 org, that you can't get off their mailing list, how they can do what they do, but that's another story.
The professional privilege tax would fall kind of in the same category. We will not be typically opening complaints on that going forward.
Thank you.
Quick question.
Kind of to reiterate, I mean, there are some management elements of this, and I think by following the standard operating procedures that the department's laid out, that Wendy is rising herself and becoming very much using those tools. I think you shouldn't see that level of spike for that many complaints that probably shouldn't.
which is somewhat confirmed by the number of dismissed complaints and just the letters of warnings. A very helpful schedule.
Can I ask a quick question? Has regulatory boards thought through whether they adjust this percentage based on taking into account the dismissals? So, I mean, I guess I'm trying to figure out philosophically, when you break it out by percentage of complaints, it seems like what you really want are the complaints that actually go through to some type of disposition, not the ones that are dismissed.
Yeah, I mean, we've taken a look at this process. I think one of the things, there's still, even in the dismissal process, there's still a fair amount of legal work that's used in
I'm still a little bit confused here because I had all the same observations you did, Bill, and looking at this information. But if you look at the fiscal year 15 financial results and go down to the cost backs line, in fiscal year 12-13, we had legal cost backs of 44,012 and total cost backs of 223. And then fiscal year 13-14, it's about the same thing. And then there's no legal costs back in the fiscal year 14-15. Did you address that, Brian, in your?
I did, and I think we can break it out for you if that's helpful moving forward. The reason it was listed this way is we had applied the cost back formula to across the board, so we didn't break out legal in the way that we have in the past.
But legal is now in that
Correct.
total number,
it's
the
in that total number,
314.
That's correct.
Oh, okay, I want to clarify that. And then I guess my next question, I understand what you said about the number of complaints, but do we have a feel for what this number might look like going forward? I mean,
Trying to do is give you all, as we give the financial numbers to the director, you know, we're gonna want to make sure that we give you all kind of an estimate of where we are in that process throughout the year. It's as the way cost back does change. It is an estimate, but throughout the year, so you're a little bit more aware of where we are in the
Questions regarding our historical financial results? Why don't we move to the draft of the fiscal 17? And I think the way I would describe this is that this is management's first cut at the fiscal 17 budget. I think we are expected to approve this by the board at the January. Has reviewed it with the appropriate people within regulatory boards. Wendy, do you have comments or observations you'd like to share at this time?
I think yes, I have a couple comments. The revenue that you'll see is roughly $40,000 than we saw actual for fiscal year 15. And that is a change related to when you all go online and renew your licenses. In the past, you've had to pay a convenience fee, and I believe you've had to pay another percentage fee, which was basically credit card processing. So you'd with renewing your license online. As we've moved to our new platform, our core platform for renewing licenses, those fees are going away, so we will not be collecting them from the licensees. So that comes out of that ultimate revenue number, and that amount is roughly $40,000. So that's why you're seeing a decrease in revenue there. So that's probably my first point. The regulatory license fee, or the state regulatory fee, I brought back up to actual. Again, I'm not sure why it was budgeted for less for this year and last year. Couldn't find any reason for that, so I brought it back up. Let's see. There have been. We just finished the annual performance process, and there are merit increases that have been approved to go into effect January 1st of 2016. I do not have an actual numbers on those, but we do expect salary increases. So I did.
Approximately what kind of overall percent? Can you make a
I
approximation?
don't have any information on that.
Unfortunately, we don't have that information at this point in time.
Anybody get a 15% merit increase?
I'm hesitant to say answer that question. I'm reluctant to answer this question at all. I imagine it won't be that high, but we've yet to get clarification from
based upon the performance reviews of each member of the staff. Everybody on the State Board of Accountancy staff get an increase.
It is based on their evaluation and the scoring that they received on their evaluation. So it is more of a merit increase, I believe, than it's been in the past. I'm not sure how it's done in the past, but I believe it was more across the board last time, where now it's being based upon performance.
Merit or cost of living?
And it will be merit based in terms of the categories that are going to be eligible for valued performance, advanced performance, and outstanding performance, and there.
Board have a role in performance reviews. We have the responsibility of appointing and hiring the executive director.
Those reviews were performed without, you're correct, without the board input. I'm not sure how that's been done in the past.
I read the law or rules that we do have executive director and the two staff really fits into the overall state system.
That's typically how the staff would definitely be under the typical process. For directors, I think programs typically, for boards that are in your situation, I think this is where we see that particular rating at. And I mean, we often at least reach out and let them know, particularly if there's going to be an
in the fiscal 17 budget, there is the budgeted amount for a 3% increase for everybody on.
An increase of some sort there, but with really lack of any information, it's somewhat of an.
I recall that a year ago, no state employees didn't get any increases.
Correct.
Right. So this year there is some increase being allowed across.
That's correct.
Curiosity question or legal question. Does this board ever have the opportunity to go into executive session regarding personnel issues?
I can answer that. Generally, no. The only statutory reason that I know of that you can go into executive session is when there's a pending litigation that the attorney would need to address with the board, and specifically, the guidance that I have read is that the board members are just allowed to listen to the attorney, and actually can't have a discussion amongst themselves while we're in the executive session, to be in compliance with the Open Meetings Act.
Again, I'd reiterate this is the fiscal 17 is a draft, and I think what's going to be helpful is that as the months, right now we only have 2 months of actual experience, as you see in the operating results. So by the January meeting, we'll have 5 or 6 months, so we'll have a better indication as to what our actual performance is. Cindy, you've reviewed this budget with Huddleston in regulatory boards, and he's in general agreement. However, you need to have it reviewed by.
Yes.
Okay.
If I can, let me point out a couple of other things.
Good.
On the third-party professional services, you'll see we came in at an actual of roughly $30,000, but I have a budget of $50,000. Again, our hearing costs are covered there, formal hearing costs, of which we had none. So we do need to make sure that we've got some space in there to pay for those kinds of services. Also, it's my understanding that any future expenses that we may see related to our new licensing platform, CORE, would fall into this area. Not completely clear on when those may be assessed, but it would be roughly $10,000 to $12,000 is what I've allocated there for such an expense. So that's why you're seeing an increase in that area. And really, it mirrors the budget for 2015. We just happened to come in low due to most likely. The other biggest difference would be state professional services. You will see a decrease of a little over $15,000. And that represents, so I explained that when you renew your licenses, we were not collecting any fees from you all any longer. However, the board will still be responsible for the credit card processing fees. And that, I'm sorry, where is that?
It was in revenue, wasn't it, Wendy?
I'm sorry.
It wasn't broken out, but it was in the reduction in revenue is what I think you said
It was in the
earlier.
reduction of revenue, but we have to cover that cost. I'm sorry. Let me back up. In the third-party professional services that I had just talked about, the convenience fee that you all paid, we won't be responsible for either. So we won't collect it in revenue. It will not be in expense either. However, we still have to cover the credit card processing fees. That's another reason you're seeing an increase in third-party professional services. So my explanation in state professional services is that expense item will not show the convenience fee any longer because we don't have to cover that. So it's not in revenue, it's not in expense either. But that's why you're seeing a reduction there.
Were we, in the past, were we charging 2 fees and we're not going to charge any now? Is that correct?
Correct.
Well, what's the rationale that we're not charging the credit card processing fee?
I believe.
Other than it came down from.
And I can be corrected that that's just not something that was set up with this new licensing system.
Can't we turn that switch back on?
I can get you a longer answer, but the short answer is that's going to have to be the way we're going to have to move forward in that way.
Okay.
Sorry, Brian, I couldn't hear you.
So we're going to,
It's
the
a
answer
sorry
is
Charlie
it's
answer.
going to, that's how it's going to have to be. I'm glad to get a more thorough answer for you if y'all would like, but
I guess if we can't change it, then we'll just have to eat it, so. Thank you.
So that covers my significant differences that you would see within the. You'll notice that the draft budget I prepared still has us at a loss of $78,000. So that just represents maybe some discussion.
Well, I think that, the board hasn't operated with a deficit in many years, so, but on the other hand, we have surplus reserves of excess of $800,000. And that was on top of the fact that not too many years ago, we had a surplus of over $1 million up by the state government. Some left, but in other words, we've really built the 800,000 up from scratch in the last 5 or 6 years. So I think the $78,000 deficit, we want to operate in the black, and so in the coming months, we'll with your help, we'll take a look at this and see at a loss, and it would be including reviewing our personnel.
Bill, I have another question just to clarify something on attachment A to the budget. The listing of salaries, and then you've got a 3% increase in there that calculates down to total office salaries of $418,732, and I see you're showing $419 in the budget. But we don't have, where are the salaries for the board members? It's not a big number, but there's 400. Not asking for an increase, I just don't see it in the budget number.
Well, it is down at the bottom.
Not over on the budget itself.
You're correct.
Well, if everybody else gets
Well, you
3%, I think we ought to get 3% of $50.
I couldn't agree more, Bill, but I wasn't gonna ask. I just thought that 4,400, you may need to go back and put that in to your salaries
I will
number.
definitely look at that. Thank you.
Okay.
Well, keep in mind, you're dealing with a bunch of accountants and auditors, so we
I
have to
didn't
come up
expect this to go
with,
smoothly.
something with an I gotcha, so.
I would maybe ask, very lighthearted, where did the $50 a day come from? I mean, is there a reason for that? I mean, it's, does anybody know where that was established, or?
Oh, it's statutory, so.
Statutory,
yeah.
okay, well, I guess.
All regulatory board members get $50 a day?
I actually don't believe so.
I believe commissions get $50 a day. I believe one of them gets $50 and one of them does. I know not everybody actually comes here and does a similar job to you actually gets paid for it.
Some of the programs that some of the
I can tell you
programs
that much.
that's right. Some of the programs that are housed under regulatory boards do not get the $50.
Do this for the money, so I mean,
I figured.
full-time job.
Any other questions regarding operating results in the draft budget for 17?
Let's make one comment to that point. This is a very small number, but when you're looking at that, Wendy,
Uh-huh.
I actually don't accept the $50 a day. So
Okay.
to the extent that helps you with $400, I guess that's something you can.
Bill
They
and
just
I
don't
will
pay
take
to
it.
you automatically?
Yeah, I mean, Karen and I documented that a couple years ago.
Okay,
So
okay.
for a number of reasons.
Any other comments? We'll move on to the other executive committee items. Or Brian, do you have anything else that you would like to share with the board? Or we'd be delighted to have you spend the rest of the day and tomorrow with us. Or
Been great to see you.
I feel like you've been almost a member of the board.
it's been great
in
to
the-
see y'all
the last
again.
6 months. So
Let me know if you need anything. Thank y'all.
thanks for your help.
Thanks, Wendy.
And it's been Brian and his department has been very helpful to Wendy in the orientation and startup process, and we're grateful for all that help, Brian. First item was board-sponsored state-specific ethics. You have information in your report, Wendy. I'm looking.
Sorry, I'm not quite following.
Well, I'm looking at a draft of the agenda that it was a draft of several weeks ago.
I believe I moved that to a different
Okay,
section.
that's fine.
I have travel information as the next item.
Okay.
You have travel report. I think that you all are used to seeing something similar, and this is basically the travel expenses over the last quarter for both investigators and myself. I know this has been presented in different formats, so I welcome any feedback on items you would like to see, not like to see going forward. Over the last quarter, I have not had any travel expenses yet, and you will note that both investigators had some state-specific ethics presentations, and then their investigative travel is broken out separately. And within any of their travel, I asked for a separation of mileage costs and then any other expenses, which would include hotel or per diem for the day, parking, etc. And then you have a total amount down the right-hand side.
I guess the question I have, if they are using state cars, why do we have mileage costs?
And I am researching that, and I'm still trying. I'm not convinced we are actually being charged those. Those have been reported in the past to try to give an idea, but we are charged a usage fee monthly, but I have yet to be able to get the exact details on what's included, if that's just maintenance on the cars. The amount we're being charged for usage does not total anywhere near a 47 cents a mile. So I hope to have more answers for you next
Okay.
time on the mileage, because I don't believe we're actually being charged that separate. And I don't think we should be. You know, we're paying a lease rate on the cars, we're paying fuel costs for the cars, and any maintenance that's needed. So,
But
so that first column may actually be, you know, we did total out a cost there associated with 47 cents a mile, but again, I'm not sure that's being actually charged to the board.
But what I think is noteworthy here, as we've known in the past, that when board personnel have been making ethics presentations, that is without charge to the participant. That's right. And so this is only the expense related. There's no time cost
Correct.
here. But nonetheless, during this period of time since July 1st, there's been 5 presentations made. Okay.
That concludes the information I have on travel.
Okay.
So I have the performance audit as the next item.
Right.
Does that match everybody else?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay.
You've sent a copy, thank you very much. You've sent a copy of the performance audit to all the board members.
And the end of September, I believe. Yes.
Have any overall comments or observations?
You know, overall, I think that the performance audit came in very respectable. We had one finding and one consideration, or I'm not sure if that's the right terminology. I think that at the last meeting, I think that we may see a finding related to peer review, and that is what the finding came in as. And read as such, under its current structure, the Tennessee State Board of Accountancy is limited in its ability to oversee the peer review program in Tennessee. Our statute requires a peer review oversight committee, and the purpose of that committee is to oversee any programs approved by this board to administer a peer review program. That oversight committee is supposed to consist of 3 individuals with certain backgrounds in order to perform that oversight function. The history on that has been that it's been very difficult to find 3 folks to serve in that capacity, and mainly because the qualifications for those individuals require peer review experience, current practice in public accountancy, and also those people could not be serving on a peer review committee somewhere else. So it limits the pool significantly, and we've had very difficult time finding folks to serve and get that group active. So the finding, I think management's response indicated that acknowledging the finding and indicating that we would discuss as a board how we might want to address that. One of the suggestions in the audit was to potentially seek support for a legislative change that would open up the results of peer reviews so that the board had a better way to oversee the profession by being able to have access to those results and therefore better regulate. So that is something that I believe this committee and the us thoughts on how we might like to address the finding going forward, and whether their recommendation is something this group is willing to support.
Can you share with us what the society's position is on peer review and the confidentiality, the no disclosure issue?
I believe, as many of you know, the this state introduced this law back in the late 80s with the confidentiality provisions intact. The purpose of the program is to be educational and remedial. Over time, and very recently, there have been a lot of things, within the profession, a lot of notable concerns about the practice of public accountancy and audits being performed not to standard. As a result, the profession has become more in line with using peer review as a resource to boards quality within the profession. So it is my belief that the profession, including the AICPA and TSCPA, are reviewing that themselves and are moving towards the idea that this is a positive move to allow boards to have access to the results of peer review.
Questions from the committee and board members?
Bill, I don't know that I have a question. I just, I guess it's an observation that I think we're going to continue to have extreme difficulty finding somebody to fill these positions on the peer review committee as it's written into the rules, and it's pretty simply, I think, a compensation issue. I mean, who is going to do that job for what we'd be willing to pay for it? And that's just a practical consideration. I mean, I think simply just keep up with what the peer review requirements are and professional standards. I mean, you try to hire some retired person or semi-retired person. I mean, it could almost turn into a full-time job for them. I just think the way it's written into the rules right now, it will not work, and which means we need to look for some other solution, which to me seems to be this legislative change, maybe the only real practical way we've got to solve this problem.
I agree, and particularly when let's assume that we have the 3 qualified people and they come up, but the results can't be shared. I mean,
Yeah.
we can't do anything with
Yeah.
them.
Yeah.
So I think it's something that, as I understand it from the society, that more proactive and moving away from the confidentiality issue and supporting it. Wendy, you and I met with the performance auditors. Do you have any observations regarding that experience? I think they were more anxious than we were.
They were very receptive to us meeting with them. I think some of the items outlined there were in the peer review section specifically were not quite accurate, so we helped them clarify that a little better, and they were very willing to our suggestions.
That was, I thought, very significant. When you read the draft, there were some errors or misunderstandings in it, and found it very positive how receptive they were to understanding and getting input to it. And except with one item, I think that they really accepted all the recommendations.
I believe so,
Right.
yes.
And that one item was to address, when they were talking about our executive director, I had suggested it be addressed as our former executive director, and they didn't want to change that. So, but we appear before who?
So on Tuesday, we appear for the sunset hearings before subcommittee of the joint governmental operation. That accurately. Bill, I believe you and I will be attending. Brian McCormack, as well as Michael Driver, I believe, will be attending. And that afternoon next week, the 20th, I believe. And the purpose of that meeting will be for us to give just an opening statement as to who we are, why we should continue, and address the finding in the report, and a chance for them to ask questions.
Anybody would like to take my place, and I won't get $50 for it, I'd be delighted to welcome that participation. So,
Is this when you present it to the committee, particularly with the finding we've got, is this not an opportunity if we think we're leaning towards a law change or statute change, whichever, to where we've got more transparency and explain the 3-year, I mean, we can have somebody out there doing substandard work for maybe 3 years before we ever get a chance to do anything. Complaints can be aired because of that we don't know the results now.
Correct.
And, maybe to soften or get the message out in anticipation, if we decide to change it, at least explain the problem.
I think that will be important, particularly the auditors even suggested that we pursue that route, and so we have endorsed that in the response. And the other thing is that, as you'll see later in the meeting, that there are a number of law and rule changes that, in addition to this, that need to be done in order to update our update and cleanup of the rules. As you recall from the last meeting, currently the law reads that our executive director must be a CPA, and appointment was with the understanding that we would ask for a law change that that be preferable or not a requirement. So that's an example of other things that we'll need to address.
Mike, would you like me to read management's comment or management's response?
That'd be good, or do you want to do that tomorrow? Yeah, why don't we do that tomorrow? Is that okay with everybody? Because you've seen the draft, okay.
And can I just
Sure.
ask if there were information available on the results, what would be included in that information?
What would be let me step back. The information made available to the state board would be included in a web portal, so it wouldn't necessarily be public. It would just be made available to the board, and it would be the peer review report, the letter of response if there was one, the corrective action letter if there were any follow-up requirements, the letter indicating that those items were completed. That covers the main peer review documents. None of the work papers or the deliberations of the committee, types of things. It would just be the documents as a result of the peer review.
Oh, I guess client information of the, okay.
No, no.
Are there any other matters to come before the executive committee? If not, we're adjourned. Anybody want a 5-minute break? Not, we'll proceed to licensing.
Go ahead and call the licensing committee to order. Got several items to discuss today, so we'll just go one at a time. Let's see. First item we have is reconsideration by Gabrielle Lebecki. She submitted additional information some additional information that we had requested in the July meeting. This credits for the online ASS PPA exams were not accepted during the audit of her CPE. I've got to recuse myself from this issue, so I will turn this meeting over to whoever wants to. What is our committee today? We're operating the old committee? I think we're operating the new committee.
Committee, which is the same. Go ahead.
Okay.
Because let me just remind the board that the committees are really have no. We cannot decide anything. Committee deliberations are to expedite the meeting tomorrow, and that was your.
Turn this over to.
I have Gay Moon and Larry Elmore officially serving on this committee, and Charlene Spiceland, and she is absent today.
I'm sorry, I didn't.
We were just talking about our planning for our advanced years just earlier. The senior, huh?
Larry and I are the two that can discuss this issue since.
Yes, and then if you have a recommendation to make to the board.
Read through everything. It looked like that we saw what Mark had seen, the former executive director, and he had in an email approved it. Now that email was addressed to her supervisor, but did it include her it was talking about her CPE, her hours that she had done for this exam.
Correct. It showed certificates that she had used.
And that was what Mark had looked at, and that was what he based his, it looks like everything's okay. But last meeting, it had been brought to our attention that that particular organization had been approved for classroom CPE as opposed to online. But is the exam that they take identical to what they would have had in a classroom situation?
You know, she provides a syllabus or a example, a commentary on what is covered in this course and then exam. I'm not sure if this is offered in a classroom setting.
Okay.
I think it's
Okay.
just offered. If anybody's familiar with this who sees this differently, but I do believe it's not something you can take in a classroom.
Okay. It looked pretty thorough and extensive, and I don't have a problem with saying this ought to be accepted. I mean, Mark had already approved it, but looking over all the information, she spent a considerable amount of time going
And I think
through
it's
this
relevant.
process.
It's
Yes.
relevant education. The thing I would say maybe in your recommendation or request is that if we approve this for her, can we also be sure that we would go ahead and approve for exams of this nature allowed to be approved by the board, but they are approved specifically. So if you approve for her, we can also add it to the list of exams that would be approved should anybody want to take them for that.
That's one concern I think we should have is we're setting a somewhat of a precedent here that we need to be comfortable with in a general way, because if not, we're gonna have to address each time it happens. So are you suggesting, Wendy, are you suggesting that we approve courses like this going forward so that we don't have to address it each time, or?
Yes, and we actually, I think you may see in the next one, I show you, we have some exams that are already approved. This one is not on the list. So if you are comfortable with this for her, I'd like to be able to add that to the
Okay.
list.
So we could add this particular course
Correct.
to the list, and then we wouldn't have to address it. So we wouldn't be approving this courses in general like this. We'd be approving this one.
This course specifically,
Okay.
correct.
Is this a rule? Is this a policy change or just
No, there is a rule.
there is a rule? Okay.
Yep, there's a rule that basically just states to ensure credit for an examination like this, they should submit it prior to taking. That doesn't necessarily mean that they have to. It's just, I think we would all agree that it's nice to know things ahead of time as opposed to after the fact.
But I think when you look beyond the rule, if this one had been submitted to us beforehand, it probably would have been approved, I would think.
Can I ask a question? One of the other issues we asked about last meeting was whether or not the approval from Mark came just to Mr. Smith or if it actually came to Gabrielle Lorbiecki as well. I don't see an email from Mr. Crocker to Gabrielle directly. And so, I mean, that to the extent that there's an argument that we relied on what you said and I took action, that may apply for Mr. Smith, but does it apply for Ms. Lorbiecki? I don't know the answer to that question, but that was just a comment.
That would kind of go back to what Wendy is saying about approving this particular CPE, you know, that going forward, anybody that took this, it would be qualified. So interpret it that way.
Question, Gabe, I saw no reference that Mark communicated with Ms. Lorbiecki herself. And to go back to the rule situation, there, just to be sure, just to be clear, there is a rule that says CPE credit may be allowed for the successful completion of exams in certified management accountant, certified information systems auditor, as well as other similar exams approved by the board. Credit will be awarded at a rate of 5 times the length of the exam taken and limited to 50% of the total CPE required. So we do have a list of exams that have already been approved.
This would just be adding to that list if we chose to.
I would ask for
agreement.
that in your recommendation, yes.
It also would still then, in the next step, automatically go in under the limitation calculations without any.
Correct.
Has this one been approved after the fact?
That's
The
That's what
online, the
this is.
online class?
Yes,
Or
that's
we're
what
saying-
that's what this request is. So Ms. Lorebecki was subject to CPE audit, and during that process, staff noticed that this particular exam or exams that she submitted were not NASBR approved because they were online.
Oh, so we're saying that it doesn't have to be NASBA approved?
Well, it does have to be NASBA approved, and their live, this organization's live programs are approved, but their online programs or exams have not been approved. But this rule gives us gives the board the authority to approve exams that don't necessarily fall under NASBA's.
Okay,
criteria.
so they don't have to go back and get this course, this online course NASBA approved?
Correct.
Okay.
Unless that's what the board would like them to do. I mean, there is a certification process that they, I suppose you could say they're not qualified through NASBA's online QAS process and on that foundation, but it is an exam. So
Your recommendation was for,
my recommendation.
if we're comfortable to approve
If you're
it.
comfortable with the content, which I felt was fairly extensive, if you're comfortable with the content, I would recommend approval and also request that we be able to list this as an approved exam.
When Mr. Smith wrote the emails to Mark, he kept listing, I think did he not refer to Gabby? I kind of thought he was sending the emails on her behalf as her supervisor, but I may have
So
misunderstood.
that's how I understand it as well.
Okay, so it was addressing her specifically and not him.
That's how I
Okay.
read it.
What do you need us to do now? Do we need to?
If you and Mr. Elmore have any discussion you want to have, and if one of you wants to make a recommendation on this item for the boards, if you recommend approval, a motion and approval of that.
I'll make a recommendation that we approve her credit, CPE credit, and then consider maybe at the full board approving this CPE online course to be part of what would be an acceptable CPE, so we don't have to go through this again. Yeah.
Can I just make there's one thing, and I may be out of Robert's Rules of Order here, but I think the next thing will only be a second to your motion, I guess, but there's an email here I just wanted to point out that is from Jerry Smith to Gabrielle that says, that copies, that forwards an email from Mark Crocker that says, Jerry, apparently ASPA has registered with NASBA, so this would qualify for CPE. It's dated December the 16th of 13. It almost sounds like that they are registered with NASBA and that they are approved as a,
Organization is registered with NASBA for live events,
not this particular,
but not, this is
Okay.
a online exam or an online exam, and NASBA has a separate registration process for anything that's live versus
okay, so
online.
the real question is the live versus,
Right, so
Right.
what we think most likely happened was Mark may not have realized that it was online. He just knew that the organization was approved through NASBA and approved that.
I think it should give us some comfort that the organization is registered with NASBA, so. I would concur that we recommend approval of this.
All right, next item, we have a request from Amon Bowen to approve the Series 66 exam for CPE credit. He's got there's a letter in there dated October the 2nd, 2015 that kind of details out the exam. It's a 100 question examination. It's timed 150 minutes to complete it. And you've got to maintain obviously a passing score of 75 to pass. There's a list of exams eligible for CPE credit. Some of those would be the CFP, Certified Financial Planner, Certified Fraud Examiner, the Certified Information Security Manager. You can read the list there. I guess the question before I give any opinion, as management, have y'all reviewed the requirements for this examination and feel comfortable that it would qualify as adequate CPE for our profession?
Yes.
Based on that, what area would you consider classifying it as? What management, A&A, other?
Management.
Management, okay. Any discussion from the committee or any other board members?
The information said that the Series 66 was in part the Series 63 exam, so that made me in the 60. That gave me a pretty good level of comfort, as well as looking at the breakdown of the content of the exam. I mean, it's all pretty pertinent to financial advising, accounting, all of that. So I felt pretty comfortable with it.
I think this is a case where this particular exam just hasn't been brought to the attention of the board for consideration, and but prior ones have.
So is this something that we would also want to add in addition to
that would be my
62, 63, and
suggestion.
64? Okay.
Has anybody looked at 65 since this particular document, while we're doing the process, if the 65 requirements are the same, so we, if we're trying to update that at the same time? Realizing it wasn't part of this request, but
I have not reviewed that. We can certainly take a look and attempt to bring a recommendation tomorrow.
if it's clearly does it while we've got a list of 62, 63, 64, when this list was passed, that's probably the last exam that was out there, and they probably have advanced forward
Right.
with 2 more exams, apparently.
And I do believe one of the ones that's already approved does not exist any longer, so we can clarify that as well.
I thought it said somewhere in the documentation that 66 was a combination of the 63.
I think you're correct.
Yeah,
I think I remember that too.
I've taken the 63 and the 65, and just for information, if any of you haven't taken it, and they are quite detailed and I think very good information for CPAs to.
Any other discussion? I'll make a recommendation, or I move that we submit a recommendation to the board to approve this request from this individual, Amon Bowen, to grant CPE credit for this exam, and additionally to add the Series 66 as an eligible exam for CPE credit under the category of other CPE. Management. As far as hours go, how many hours would this?
That we'd reference back to the rule, which states that it be 5 times the, add up a little earlier. It's under qualifying program.
It's 5 times the length of each exam taken and limited to 50% of the total CPE required under the rule.
If it's a 2.5 hour exam,
It would
5
be
times
12 and a half hours.
time. Okay. All right. So we'll grant it for 12.5 hours. Second for that.
Second.
Any more discussion? Okay. Excuse me. The next item we have is a application for reinstatement of revoked license for Tracy Wright. We discussed this at our last meeting, and I think it was the board's charge to her we couldn't grant any kind of conditional approval or any preliminary approval, that if she wanted for this to be considered, then she would need to actually go through the reapplication process. And from reading the documents that I have, it looks like she has done that. Is that correct?
That is correct. And the reason this is being brought to you today is simply because the way the rule reads, Rule 20-01-.10 indicates that the reinstatement application shall be submitted to the board at its next meeting and evaluated and reviewed for presentation at the following meeting. So the request today is for you all to assess that everything is there that you would like and approve it for presentation at the January meeting. At that time, we will allow her to come before the board. You all will be able to ask questions and deliberate on whether you would like to reinstate her license or not. Today, you're just giving us the authority to do that in January.
There's no limit to our questioning when at the next meeting, if we invite her back to come at the next meeting.
No, you can have as much fun as you want.
I don't know if I'd call it fun, but yeah.
But staff has reviewed the application that she submitted for completeness. It appears that everything is there that is required for that deliberation process.
And I realize I have to recuse myself on this situation for reasons because our firm was the successor auditor on a client that she worked with, and so.
Well, so long as there's not a conflict of interest, you don't have to recuse yourself. If you have any knowledge as to any of the events or incidents which led to her revocation and why she may not need to be reinstated, you feel free to discuss those with the committee and the board.
Just as a matter of technicality on this application, which I'm glad to hear that because I'll hold other remarks till the next meeting, but on the application requirements, it says the application shall shall consist of a petition which shall set forth in full the circumstances surrounding the revocation or suspension. From my reading of her reapplication, she explained why she didn't pay the penalty in full, but she didn't explain why she didn't get the peer review, and never she didn't discuss the reasons for the revocation. She discussed the reasons that she didn't pay the penalty. Now, that may be too technical, but I don't see anywhere where she discussed anything about the peer review not being done, which was the original reason for the original suspension.
Mr. Elmore, are you stating that you don't feel that the application is complete because she does not explain why she initially did not do the CPE as required?
Why she didn't have the peer review.
Oh, why she didn't have the peer review. And so you would like her to explain that, and that would satisfy what you would consider to be a completed application?
I can add, Ms. Wright's license was not revoked for failure to have a peer review. It was for failure to satisfy the terms of the consent order.
I thought she was operating as in the appearance as a CPA because it was in the phone book and it was on her answering machine, but she wasn't technically a CPA. I thought,
I believe there's a variety of
That came later.
incidents and reasons. Yeah, and I do think that did come later. But I think we just need to limit our discussion today to whether or not we consider this application to be submitted and complete so that it can be evaluated like this next time.
and that's why I asked the question about, are we limited as far as what we can ask? Because I've got
Oh, I
questions.
thought you, sir, I'm sorry. I thought you meant what you could ask her.
Yeah,
at the
we could
January
ask
meeting.
her. That's what I'm saying. Because I've got questions that may not be in here. For example, how many audit reports did you issue signing as a CPA when you weren't a CPA?
And you can ask that, yes, sir, you can ask
Okay.
that to her.
Okay.
If we consider this application to be complete and we extend her to come to the next meeting to present her side of the story, for the board to deliberate on both the application and whatever questions you may want to ask her, absolutely. But today, we're just looking to see if the application's complete so that then she can come to the January meeting.
Looking at it from hearing y'all's review of this as well, I mean, it appears to be completed. We're not giving any kind of indication as far as what we may or may not do as far as granting approval or not. But I think that I would recommend I move that we recommend to the board that we allow the process to continue and she appear at the next board meeting for deliberation, questioning, and for us to make a formal decision on whether or not we reinstate her license. And I'll ask for a second on that.
Second.
Okay.
I'll say one more thing on that. There's another, in paragraph 4 of the reinstatement process, it says the board may also question the applicant, complainant, or individual injured. So in this particular case, I would suggest that we offer to the client who was injured the opportunity to speak at the next meeting too, if they would like.
Do that?
Because in this case, there are some DOL audits that they're having to have redone at substantial cost to them because of the fact that she was not licensed but claimed to be.
More discussion on this item? Okay. Next item we have is an application for reinstatement of revoked license for Warren H. Pennington. We've got a copy of a lot of documentation regarding this request. Let me find it here. I guess, from my understanding of this case, Mr. Pennington was charged, and attorneys in the room help correct me if I'm a mistake, 'cause I'm definitely not an attorney, but he was charged with I believe it was 5 counts of theft. Let's see if I can find it. Okay. On December 10th, the respondent was found guilty at a jury trial of 5 felony counts of theft by conversion and 6 felony counts of theft by taking. taking. And the respondent was sentenced to 3 years in prison and 17 years on probation. I don't know the terminology, but he basically, did he appeal this, and it was dropped because of the statute of limitations? Am I interpreting that correctly?
That's correct. If you notice, really the crux of this whole situation is that in his consent order that he's executed back in 2013, there is a paragraph stating that on appeal, if he won, he would be able to get his license reinstated. And so he has submitted the application, paid the fee, it was overnighted, and so the application is all here. And so we need to determine as to whether or not it is submitted and completed application so that we can then deliberate on this so that you all can deliberate on this at the very next meeting.
All right, so in January of 2013, State Board acted and took away his license.
That's correct.
In July of 2013, it looks like the appeal was granted based on statute of limitation issues.
I have not researched this. I just helped this particular licensee compile his application, and we've got from now, if it's approved as completed, until January to kind of unearth the details.
So the question in this case is whether or not the same case as the one before, whether or not we want to invite this back. Okay, but can we ask questions about this? I mean, how much can we discuss about this now?
The rule just says that the application is to be submitted here, and then it's evaluated and reviewed at the next meeting.
Okay, so let me just ask a general question then, if I can try. Okay, let's just say a person's convicted of a felony, and then it gets appealed. And so basically it's dropped because of a statute of limitation. They obviously committed the crime because it was you were charged and convicted by a jury trial. Now, this is not related to this, just in general. It just happens to be coincidental. And then they decide a couple years later, let's say within that 5-year window, to go and apply for a CPA exam. So when they fill out our application, it says, have you been convicted within the past 5 years? I believe it says, have you been convicted of a felony? It says convicted, not charged. They would mark no, and that would be a correct answer.
That's correct.
Even though they were convicted.
That conviction's overturned.
And it was overturned by the appeal.
Although it occurred.
So one court found them guilty, the next court, they got off on a technicality because of statute of limitation.
But the take-home is that he has not been convicted. He won on appeal.
But you see my point, the court said he was guilty, but then because of the statute, they're saying, well, even though he was guilty, you can't go back and bring that historical information back in. My point, I understand the rule. I understand. I stole the money.
Well, I don't.
According to the jury, they're just saying technically they shouldn't have been able to go back 4 years or whatever the statute was and make that charge or conviction.
I understand, but I don't. Kind of put me in a rock and a hard place. I kind of feel as though if any one of us or a child or whoever got in trouble and was convicted and we fought it and went on appeal, then they didn't do it. Whether they did it or not, as far as the criminal law courts are done, they didn't do it. The criminal law courts could not convict this person based upon the evidence that was there. That's at the end. At the end of the day.
What would the correct answer if we had this person come in general, and I asked the question, did you steal money from a client? What's the correct answer?
Well, I mean, that's his answer. I don't know if he did or not. But the answer is that if you were not content with the answer, and if he did admit that he did steal some, or a particular individual did admit they stole some money, there are moral qualifications with holding a license. And if the board were to deem that particular activity was not of the moral character that you would like as a licensee.
Let me ask you a simpler question then. Basically what I'm asking is, do we have to abide by statute of limitations when we're evaluating license reinstatement?
That's something that would take me some time to look into. But
okay.
I think right now we're just looking to see if the application is complete. And, my intention over the next 3 months is to have quite the presentation on everything and look into it all. But this really just came across onto my plate Thursday of last week.
That's what I'm getting at. I just want to make sure. I think the application's complete.
We'll dig through it.
Okay. I'd like to know that answer.
Yes, sir. We'll dig through it.
Okay.
So long as the board makes a motion and wants me to dig through it.
I think he has a good point. We also have the moral character as another fallback, even if you decide he was not technically convicted of the felony because of the statute of limitations, you can fall back on the moral character issue too.
Also, this individual's licensed in multiple jurisdictions. He's in the process of being reinstated or attempting to be reinstated in those, and we should know a lot more about that come January.
Kind of like somebody gets arrested, but they don't get the Miranda rights read to them. They still were guilty of the crime, but they didn't.
Technically, they would not be guilty of the crime unless convicted by court.
If we get into the business of determining whether somebody has moral character or not, where is the beginning and end of that? I mean, if somebody had been married 4 times and only divorced twice, are you saying they can't be a CPA?
Well, I'm saying in the rule, particularly in the reinstatement rules, it says that you can consider I can't remember exactly what it says, but it says in considering the application, the board may consider all activities of the applicant, applicant's general reputation for truth and professional probity, whatever that is. Reputation is moral character. In the business world, I'm not saying you should assess their personal life, but their professional life, I think you should.
I guess I go back to my original question. I was really curious more for procedure in future cases, but had this information not been okay, for example, I think in his letter he says he is requesting to return to or to take his status to inactive status, and then he's going to apply in Texas where he resides for application there. Flip it around, and let's say this had happened in Texas, and then he'd never applied to Tennessee. When he applies to Tennessee, he fills out our application. Then it says, have you been convicted of a felony? The answer is no, and we move on down the road. We're not going to go research a person's past, right?
Well,
We're not.
Mr. Eldridge, there is a piece on the application is, have you ever been disciplined by any board?
Okay.
And so we would be able to contact the Texas Board of Accountancy, find out what was going on with that, and then utilize that in the evaluation of his application.
Within 5 years, is there a limitation?
I'm not as familiar with the applications as perhaps Wendy is.
We don't have to. I don't waste too much time on this. But
I know for a fact on the reinstatement application, there is a box that he did check that stated that he had been disciplined, and he had to provide documentation explaining as to what's going on with that.
He did answer convicted of a felony, no. And then provided additional information on any other disciplinary action.
I mean, are y'all comfortable that all the information's here to proceed for the next board meeting?
That's up to you. I mean, are you comfortable that?
I'm asking y'all. Have y'all looked through it? I'm okay. It looks
I
like.
helped to compile this. I've been in contact with this particular individual. I mean, he provided ample stuff, and I really think that between now and the next board meeting, we'll be able to sit down, piece it all together, contact the requisite courts and boards, and have a much better story, clearer story to paint for the board next time.
As similar to the previous case we discussed, is there a potential to find out who may have been harmed and invite them? Are we just assuming no one's been harmed since he wasn't convicted of a felony?
I'm going to be completely honest with you. This came across my desk on Thursday of last week, and we have been full swing preparing for this meeting. I've read about 2 pages of that appeal. I read the front page, and I read the last. And other than that, I helped him I said, you need to get your payment in, you need to get the application done, you need to compile all this stuff together. We got it all together just so that there's an application in, so that then we can evaluate and assess his application for reinstatement next time.
Yeah, and that was the reason I was asking the question is, are we supposed to ignore all that because it was appealed and it was approved, or do we have to, as part of our moral obligation, because we know that, do we have to introduce that into our deliberations?
I don't think you have to ignore anything.
Okay.
I think when the statute talks about whether or not somebody's been convicted of a felony, obviously, as soon as if there's a conviction at the lower court and you appeal and it's overturned on those counts, and those counts, the original conviction, I mean, it's gone. It doesn't exist anymore. Well, what I'm interested in reading here is when somebody is indicted and convicted of 25 counts or whatnot. I'm trying to see, are we addressing all 25, or is there something out there lingering? Does that make sense? It could have been, there could still be one more lingering. We do have some documentation here from the attorneys that representative that seem to be familiar with this. I guess that we could probably get to and find all of the counts of that. We should be able to, and then kind of come back and see if there's anything outstanding, really, because this is a pretty lengthy opinion here, where they're. Especially when they come back and they make a reversal, if there's going to be another underlying, if there's going to be another action. So,
do those questions that you have in your mind about those other counts, would that make this application, you would deem it incomplete way, so that maybe you need to until January to get the application together and then present it to us to say, yes, it is complete or not?
He's filled out the reinstatement application form. He's provided us with the appeal. My understanding from the appeal is that several of them were overturned. It was sent back to trial court for some counts, and that the state of Georgia has chosen not to prosecute. So I don't know if that's a lack of evidence. I don't know if it's a lack of interest. I could not tell you at this point in time, but in my opinion, for whatever it matters, he's got a completed application. We can spend a significant amount of time reviewing this in between now and January, and then also discussing it with the committee and the board next January, if the board feels that it's a completed application.
I would suggest we consider it a complete application so that they can do their due diligence on, I'm looking into it further, and move it to the January meeting for the further discussion. And that way you'll have more time to, that's what I would suggest.
I agree with that.
A motion and a second and a vote.
I'll make that motion that I just elaborated on.
I'll second.
I'll vote for it. Basically, we took the same action on Ms. Wright and Mr. Pennington's. We're basically just recommending moving on, and we're basically saying in our opinion, it's a complete reapplication, and we'll push it on to the January board meeting. Correct?
Correct.
All right. The next item we have is a request for acceptance of intermediate accounting from South College as an upper division credit by Mr. Jonathan Overton.
This one sounds like to me that it's just how they've labeled the course.
Technicality.
They've labeled the course as a 200 level course, and everybody else is labeling the same course as a 300 level course, or 3,000 or whatever it is, and it's just a label.
I agree with that. I think intermediate accounting is definitely an upper level class, correct? I guess the question I had is I'm trying to think back when I was in college. I thought it's a sophomore level class though, isn't it? Don't you take intermediate your second year of college?
I think you
Junior.
take principles
junior?
as a sophomore.
Okay, maybe that's okay.
Yeah.
It's been so long since I've been in college. Well, we have computers now. We used to use a charcoal and I guess reviewing all the information there, I think that, like I said, like Larry said, it seems like more of a technicality, and the school just classified it at a different number for whatever reason. I think there was a letter in there from from the assistant professor of accounting, Jim Hollingsworth, that basically said that the book they used is the Stice and Stice Intermediate Accounting book, which is used by several other college and universities. So, I mean, it seems like more of technicality. So with that, I would recommend that we grant approval or acceptance of this class as an upward vision credit for Mr. Overton.
Second.
Any more discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Okay. The next item we have is a request for extension of exam scores by Nadia Jasani. Ms. Jasani passed the CPA exam in August of 2003. And passed in 2003, and never actually pursued her formal CPA licensing due to, as she said, due to marriage, childbirth, and other family commitments, and just never got around to it. She has moved to Tennessee. I think she lived in Colorado when she passed it in 2003. She's living in Tennessee now, and she's asking that we grant an extension and allow the scores from when she passed it in 2003 to count now. I'll open up for discussion on this.
You ever had this happen before? Is this an anomaly that?
We've had it. I know we've had it within the past year on one individual. I don't remember the specifics, but I know we did have a very similar with. Matter of fact, it was right at the 10-year mark, and there was some weird dating issue that we did. It's very similar.
I believe it, maybe Karen can help me with this if she has recollection, but it is my understanding that a while back the scores kind of were never expired. And the board implemented a rule, is it a rule? Yes. That they will expire within 10 years. So now we are being faced with a few requests for an extension on those exam scores, and so we have to bring each of them to the board. So hers expired in 2013.
My recollection that we have approved all the requests.
Mine as well.
Is that?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Our rule change, if I remember, was essentially driven by the fact that our old records tried to float down the river.
Yes.
And
That's
we
what I
had no way of proving them, and somebody that hadn't looked at them. And we also talked about the validity of someone having passed it then, not taking CPE to stay current, up to date, whether that person would be currently granted a license. I mean, that was part of our original discussion, I think.
Well, that's a good point. I mean, this person who passed the exam and has not been taking the CPE that is required all this time, and then is there no catch-up required? I guess not.
Part of our discussion, as I remember it, because of the relevance and how long, I mean, how things have changed.
Changed a little bit, yeah.
Just a tad.
But we don't have a CPE requirement for people before they get their certificate. That's the case. We're granting them to get a certificate in this case, or supposedly.
I guess my thoughts is there was really no additional educational requirements that she would have had to have had. I guess she would have had to pass the ethics portion, but other than that, it's more paperwork and paying a fee. Is that correct?
The experience requirement. 1 year within. Is there a time?
Within the last 10 years, I believe.
1 year experience within the last 10 years.
She does note that she is working for H&R Block and is studying to be an enrolled agent.
Doesn't that experience, and I haven't looked at it, still require you to be under a CPA at the time?
Part of her CPA application will ask a licensed CPA who has personal knowledge of her experience to affirm to that knowledge.
But don't they have, and like I have not read it recently, I thought that you had to be in the supervisory role of that person.
No, sir, you do not. You have to have personal knowledge that the applicant has the required experience.
I think you're right. It used to say they had to be supervising you, work under that person. It may not be that way anymore.
Have to rely on our legal counsel.
Could have a CPA working as their supervisor, though, at H&R Block.
Well, I understand that, but
Just give me a moment to find the relevant statute within the Act, because the rule references the Act. I think that's where we're going to find our answer.
Several ways. I mean, I would assume that one of the reasons for strict requirements around the licensing process is to protect the public from persons who would not be qualified to practice in public accounting as a CPA. So when you take a person who passed the exam 10 years ago, 13 years ago, hasn't had CPE since, and you give them a license and they're set out to practice,
What would happen if you had a person that was a practicing CPA, took their license inactive for 10 years or 12 years, and then decided after that to go back? What's the process? They just complete the reapplication process to take it active, right? Is there any back seat? That's what I'm asking. Is there back seat?
You got to get 80 hours of CPE. Let me personally attest to that.
In technical subjects, correct, Karen?
So how would this work then? Because maybe I'm remembering the rules differently, but your first year that you are granted your license, you aren't required to get CPE because the test counted for that. Is that correct? So,
There's no CPE requirement for the first year. That's correct.
but it's not because the test counted for the CPE? It's just no requirement whatsoever? So in this case, she would not have to get CPE the first year? I always
Yes,
thought the test...
Although she may have to get CPE for her next renewal, it's going to depend on the license number that she was issued and her expiration date.
I always thought that the test, you got a certain amount of credits for passing the exam. Okay.
Well, to address the many questions, in probably reverse order, Mr. Eldridge, Rule 0020-05-.03, parenthetical 2, says that a license holder seeking to renew an initial certificate issued less than 2 years but more than 1 year prior to expiration must provide evidence of having completed at least 40 hours of continuing education, and it goes on to specify as to what those particular hours are. That's, if you're initial applicant, then you are right, you do not have to do it for the first year. When you do renew after the 2-year period of your initial licensure, yes, you will have to show 40 hours. The other questions with regard to experience and supervisors, both the rule and the statute say, in essence, the same exact thing, and it does not indicate that you have to be doing the work for a licensed CPA. It just says that the work needs to be verified by a licensed CPA. And so Ms. Condon would be correct that this individual would just have to have personal knowledge of both the work and the individual, and then obviously submit the verification to the board.
the person would have to be involved with in their work environment to be able to review the work. You can't just pull somebody off the street, right, and they say, well, it sounds like it's good. She does a good job.
There's nothing in here that I see that says that the licensee in their verification has to review any of the work of this particular person.
I thought you said they had to be familiar with the work. Read that
Well,
again.
I mean, they'd have to know that the person's not lying and saying that they're working somewhere that they're not. I mean, I could read it to you if
Yeah.
you'd like. Let's start with the statute first. This is TCA 621-106. Under F, an applicant for initial issuance of a certificate under this section shall show that the applicant has had 1 year of experience. This experience shall include providing any type of service or advice involving the use of accounting, attest, management advisory, financial advisory, tax, or consulting skills, all of which were verified by a licensee. This experience will be acceptable if it is gained through employment in government, industry, academia, or public practice. The rule states the experience, this is Rule 0020-02-.03. The experience required to be demonstrated for issuance of an initial certificate pursuant to that same statute, although that needs to be updated because it's pointing to an old letter. Shall meet the requirements of this rule. Experience may consist of providing any type of services or advice using accounting, attest, management advisory, financial advisory, tax, or consulting skills. B, the applicant shall have his or her experience verified to the board by a licensee as defined in the Act or a licensee from another state. Acceptable experience shall include employment in industry, government, academia, or public practice. In evaluating the experience, the board shall consider such factors as the complexity and diversity of the work. And then there's more in that rule about 2,000 hours of work is a year and so forth and so on.
So it sounds like that's pretty daggone broad. I mean, it just throws consulting at the end. Consulting can be anything.
That's correct.
I mean, they could be consulting on fast food quality tasting, or I mean,
I think you're right that it could arguably be anything, but of course, the verification by a licensee, you would hope that this particular licensee would.
I'm just saying our rule seems extremely broad by just throwing consulting at the end. That just opened. I mean, consulting can be anything. I mean, I'm consulting with you right now. That's consulting.
And that's according to the statute as well. So I mean, the rule is basically verbatim the statute, which I know doesn't necessarily help.
So do we have the authority to, or would it be wise to, in this case, if we were to approve this request, since it is past the 10-year normal requirement, and since when you have a reinstatement after being inactive, you have to get 40 hours, would it be improper to ask her to get 40 hours the first year if we were to approve this?
It would not comport with what the rules state. We could not. I do not see the authority in here to deviate from the rules enforcing this particular licensee.
We can either prove it as is or deny it. That's basically all we can do.
That's
Can I ask a quick question on that, though?
Yes, sir.
Because if you look at the rules, they actually say 0020-01-0.06 examinations. Number 11, all CPA exam scores shall expire 10 years after the first passing score is earned. However, upon written request by the applicant, the board may, in its sole discretion, grant an extension of the score expiration for good cause shown. If it's in our sole discretion, why couldn't we put conditions related to our extension?
That's my point, because we're going past the 10 years, so it's already different than the normal case.
Mr. Roberts, could you say what number that was under? I don't know, it's .06, but after that.
Yeah, number 11, the last one.
Thank you, sir. I understand what you're stating. To me, this is the discretion to say yes or no to the extension. I don't necessarily see that there's within the rule that you can put conditions upon that particular extension. I mean, I could be wrong. This is something that we could address. I could, confer with Tony later this evening. We would have a better answer tomorrow. But I don't see anything in here that says we could put conditions, and I don't know that we would want to create a precedent of deviating from the rules for one particular individual. We want to kind of follow the rules. I mean, if no one after the initial certificate is issued has to do 40 that first year, I don't know if we'd want to force someone to do it.
I guess I don't disagree with that at all. One of the countervailing policy considerations that board members we need to consider is, well, the alternative is then we say no because our job is to protect a profession. So this person is then going to have to go through the whole entire process again. And that may be something we may want to consider as to whether or not we ask legal to look at it, further and more in depth to see if in fact the words in sole discretion or something else would allow us to do like some type of conditional acceptance of the extension request.
Let me make a suggestion that the committee make a recommendation regarding this request, and that if there is a clarification or a change of the rules or law, I guess this is a rule, right?
Well, yes,
It
sir.
should
And
be
the rule,
both.
I mean,
It's both.
the rule with regard to the extension, yes.
Right.
With regard to the experience, that the rule almost mimics, or it's almost identical to the statute.
But the point is that we're about ready to consider numerous other rule modifications, and this be added to that if that's the pleasure of the board to change this rule or clarify it.
Okay. Yeah, I mean,
Or
that's
a suggestion, but whether the committee agrees or not.
right.
Will we need to postpone then making this decision until we?
I would suggest that you make a recommendation regarding this request.
I mean, I guess based on the discussion I've heard today, that we potentially could be doing a disservice to the profession if we are allowing somebody to become active this long without had any training nor and very, very little work experience.
But we've done that several times in the past couple of years.
The only one I remember was one, and I thought that was just a technicality as far as when the date was.
Yeah, being wrong once doesn't mean you should be wrong twice, but
Any more discussion on this?
It says she has a master's from Cornell. I'm kind of curious as to when she got that master's. I mean, we were talking about her lack of involvement in the business or accounting profession, but if she got her master's, I mean, that kind of tells me that she's kept up or she's studying, but I don't know when she got that.
It's subsequent to passing the exam.
But it doesn't say like 5
Could have been.
years. It could have been
5,
yeah.
7. Who knows?
I don't know if that's something that we would want to know or if it matters.
Can I ask, when these requests have been made before, was there any consideration given to how long of a time span it was from passing the exam? I mean, was it this long?
my recollection is it was over the 10 years, and that's why the request came.
It was equally as long.
10 years plus at least today. I mean,
Recall though, if in those previous requests the individuals are actually practicing bookkeeping or doing something during the period that I don't know. I don't recall. I remember the request, but I don't recall the details of it.
No, I do not recall.
It would seem like we'd want to at least be consistent with how we're treating these requests, and maybe that would involve some change in the rules, but I would think regardless of that, we would still want to be consistent.
Aaron or Don and Ray, do you recall examples or the circumstances regarding this type of request before?
I know that they've been requested and approved before, but I don't recall there being discussion about the potential applicants' activities between passing the exam and making the request.
Gentlemen,
I think they were all right around this time frame too. They were just barely out of the 10-year window. And I don't recall the board taking any real look at what have they been doing for the last 10 years. Which is
we have a
not to
lot of
say
new,
they
more
should.
vigorous board members now than.
Which is not to say they shouldn't. That's right.
Well,
I recommend we approve this situation. I guess as I've thought about it, just being blunt, if a person takes an exam, passes it, and then goes and just sits and plays solitaire through hours and hours of CPE over the course of 10 years, have they really advanced themselves? If that was the case, we wouldn't have any question. I know you're not supposed to do that. I'm just saying a person could if they wanted to. That doesn't necessarily make them any more or less qualified, but we wouldn't have a problem with that. I don't know if that's a good justification or not. I find it hard to tell someone who's passed the exam before, sorry, you got to take it again.
Comments from investigators. I noticed she was in, was it Colorado where she was, that she took the exam? I don't know what Colorado's limitations are, but what would stop her from applying for a license in Colorado, getting it, and then reciprocating to here?
Fair point.
Then she gets out of the 10-year problem.
And if Colorado had no limitation?
Well, I don't know.
I'm saying,
they
you're
do or
saying,
not.
I'm just saying if, then
Right.
that's fine.
Right.
They've already been turned down in Colorado.
Maybe that's what she's doing here, trying to get back home.
If the board would like to take 5 minutes, I've got Tony's looking into the discretion, whether or not we can put conditions upon the extension.
I think a 5-minute recess could be very advisable.
Can we go on to the next?
They're all good.
Can we go on to the next items, or we want to take a break now?
Well, we can go ahead and,
I'm just trying to be diligent and get on through.
fine, go ahead.
Go with that?
Yeah, go ahead and finish up.
All right, next item we have is firm permit renewals process change. Let me see, looks like we've got some new policies or processes. When do you want to talk about those?
Yes, thank you.
Ready to go back to the request for exam score extensions?
That's correct, and I've got some exciting news for everyone.
Fire away.
I spoke with Tony, and because the board has the sole discretion to extend, you can implement conditions. And the way that this would work is that we would want this recorded on the minutes, and we would want it then in writing and have her to agree to whatever this particular conditions may be, if you so choose. Because you have the discretion to flat out say no, or flat out say yes, and anywhere in between.
I think whatever we decide on this case needs to be, if we're considering making a change to our rules to amend that, I think that's something we really need to look at as far as the possibility of removing the 10-year expiration, but adding some additional CPE requirements to refresher type CPE to that. So I'll open up for discussion with that to consider.
When would that required CPE become a requirement, after delaying it 3 years, 8 years, 9.5 years?
What could we make it consistent with the rules on reinstatement of your license after a dormant period? Just make it consistent with the same, and I don't know what that rule is, but make it the same.
Going from inactive to active is 80.
Going from inactive to active requires 80 hours of technical CPE in a 2-year period, while reinstating an expired license requires that CPE to be earned in a 6-month period.
$80. Expired license, how much do you have to have?
80 hours of technical CPE
Within
in
6 months.
6 months, and it's considered penalty CPE that can't be used again for renewal purposes.
I think that's a reasonable, the 80 hours in 6 months is more of a penalty. I don't know if I'd call it penalty, but to me, I would much rather do that than I would have to take the CPA exam over. If we followed our rules the way they're written, technically 10 years and a day, you got to take the exam over. I would be jumping for joy to take the CPE for that. That's just my opinion.
Should we consider, or are we talking about overall rule change, or are we talking about this particular case right now?
I think we're talking about both, because in my opinion, whatever we do here would be something that we would want to consider with the rules as well. You're shaking your head. You got.
Well,
May I ask, I think I missed earlier, how many of these has this board seen in the last couple years?
I know we've had one in the past year. I don't remember before that.
2 or 3 in what, 5-year period?
That's what I would say. The rule changed just no more than 5 years ago.
It was after the 2010
The flood, yeah.
I mean, certainly, the board may do whatever it wants to do, especially drafting a rule, but, with this discretion, you can look at these on a case-by-case basis. There's 3 within 5 years. To draft something that would be applicable to all and fair in certain circumstances may be pretty difficult to do given different factual circumstances. Like Mr. Eldridge said, if there's some individual playing solitaire on the phone, or if they've been doing nothing for 10 years, but this particular applicant got a master's degree, studying to be an old agent, doing different things that's actually beneficial for herself. I think it's tough, especially when you have so few. Legal would be happy to take a whack at it, though.
No, that's fine. I mean, I hear your point.
Not trying to dissuade
I don't disagree with that. I mean, I think based on the numbers. So, I guess with all that said, my recommendation would be that we grant the test scores and require 80 hours. I don't know what time period. I'm open to whatever we discuss. So let's discuss this a little bit more.
I'm just curious about when she got her master's. I mean, if she got that in the last 5 years, would you feel differently? I mean, she has an MBA.
MBA is not specific to accounting.
Right.
No, but it is.
It's got some, but
I think an MBA has some benefits and attributes that a Master's of Accountancy does not.
But not in the practice of accounting.
In the practice of accounting, that's just a personal opinion.
But in looking at our role to protect the public from people who are going to be out there issuing audit reports, I mean, when you issue a CPA certificate or a license, they're not just doing tax returns in H&R Block. They're issuing audit reports, compilations, reviews. Those rules are in black and white from what they were 10 years ago, much less 13 years ago. So if they have not taken any CPE in the rules of attest standards, which you're not going to learn the attest standards in the MBA program. So I just think there needs to be some requirement for CPE specific to practice of accounting before they're just turned loose after 13 years of having the knowledge 13 years ago is a different body of knowledge than what they need now.
I would have a concern that just because board members change, the requirements on licensees change. To me, that doesn't seem fair to the potential licensees. And if the board has not required this stuff in the past, why would you do it for this person? I guess that would be my concern. It seems inconsistent treatment.
I think we're probably very inconsistent board to board. I mean, it's based on the personal, I guess, the personal opinions. I mean, that was, I guess the only way to prevent against that is to change the rules. And it sounds like that's not a efficient thing to do at this point based on the volume of requests.
That's up to you guys.
No, I agree with that point. That's a good point. So, I mean.
Yeah, and that is a good point, but, if the licensees don't know, then how would they know? I mean, it is up to the board's discretion, I guess.
How would they know what?
Well, how would they know, okay, if I don't go ahead and get this done, or if I can go and appeal because I know this other person did, then they may assume that they would get the same treatment.
But technically, I'd argue on that one and say that the rules say you can't do it. 10 years, forget it. I mean, you can't.
Right, but that's not true because.
But it says
precedent says it can be done.
But what does the law or the rule say? It says unless approved by the board.
Based on the circumstances.
All CPA exam scores shall expire 10 years after the first passing score is earned. However, upon written request by the applicant, the board may, in its sole discretion, grant an extension of the score expiration date for good cause shown. So, the determination would be whether or not the board deems that there's good cause shown here. Written, good cause, your discretion.
I mean, I think that consistency is obviously in the public's best interest. I think that's pretty much been shared by everybody up here at some point or another. I think when when the board is given the opportunity to do something, which is basically a gift to someone, which means that your exam scores have expired and you're not entitled to be able to use them unless the board grants that gift, then I think the need for consistency might be lessened a little bit, because I think it is a fact-by-fact situation. So if someone, for example, took the CPA exam, maybe he got married and had children and decided he wanted to be the primary caretaker for a little while, then went and worked as a bookkeeper for a company for 13 years, then had an opportunity to be promoted and wanted to get his CPA license, that's a different situation than someone that got married and was a caretaker of children for 10 years and decided he or she then wanted to go back to get a CPA license, in my opinion. And in that situation, consistency would be a bad thing, I would think. So that my only thought is, if the board members want to extend the scores, and personally I think we should extend the scores because of the achievement there is in passing the CPA exam, I certainly think it's appropriate to figure out some level of comfort that the person is up to date on the various attests, et cetera, services that they're holding themselves out to provide.
More discussion? Any recommendations from the committee?
I would recommend that we approve the application for using the exam scores, require 80 hours of CPE that has to be done within a 2-year period, and that we refer further looking into this with the next change in rules to make it a rule change. And they don't have to be together. That recommendation doesn't have to be dual pronged if you want to separate the two.
I would second the approval and the 80 hours of CPE. The only reason I declined, I would question whether a second on the other one is based on what we were talking about, is the volume is so low, the cost benefit is I don't know that it's there after hearing those.
And it's important to note that if we do craft a rule, you're going to remove the discretion from the board. We'll have to follow the rule.
My second, he split it up. I seconded the extension. Do we need to grant an extension, a 1-year extension or a 6-month extension? Because that's what she's asking for. It's not unlimited. She has to have some sort of time period to get this done. Are we granting it? Would we go ahead and issue the license on the condition that she would get the 80 hours of CPE and go ahead and issue her license, or?
If I could mention, she's asking for the opportunity to apply for a license, so she'll still have to go through the application process.
I guess we really just need to say that we're going to grant her the extension of her scores, like you said, and then.
So that she meets the additional CPE.
Could we license her with the condition that she does get those 80 hours, or would she have to wait?
I'd say prior to issuance of the license.
Okay, I'm fine with that.
That's the cleanest way, so we're not having to monitor it.
That's fair. I think that's fair.
Let me clarify, ask for a clarification. Are we approving the issuance of a certificate? Are we asking for a certificate and a license?
As it stands, she can't apply for a license because her exam grades have expired. If you grant an extension, then she'll be able to apply for the license.
certificate.
Yes.
and then apply for a license,
It's all at the same time.
all at the same time. Yeah, okay.
So we have to make, would our motion have to be that we grant her approval to apply for a license after 80 hours?
Or perhaps that she should include with her application proof of 80 hours of CPE.
Have to wait 2 years to get it. She could go get it in the next 2 weeks if she wants to do that.
That CPE or technical CPE? While we're talking about motions.
What do we require on the reinstatement on the 80 hours?
Reactivation of a license, all of the CPE would have to be in technical subjects.
Make my motion in that regard.
Motion is second. Any more discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Did you have something?
Can I just clarify?
Sure.
Make sure I understand that if this is, the motion that was made was to approve an extension of her exam scores, provided that she submit 80 hours of technical CPE taken within the past 2 years.
Not necessarily within the last prior to application. So, because she could not have taken CPE within the last 2 years.
Basically,
She
she's
didn't know
got a
that
2-year score
She's going to have to
extension.
do it in the future, right?
Yeah, she's
Okay.
basically got a 2-year extension
to-
on
So
her
within
scores.
2 years.
So, yeah.
Okay, will we approve any classwork that she does for her enrolled agency status? And there's some CPE that's required for that or not?
If it falls under a NASBA-approved provider or
Okay.
something of that nature.
Then we would include, so there may be some that she's already had.
And just so that you understand it, because I had to look at it the other day, and enrolled agents do not recognize their CPE for their national organization does not recognize NASBA. If it's a NASBA-approved course, it doesn't necessarily qualify for the EA annual renewals. It has to be on the IRS's published list.
So there's some that may fall on both lists, but some that may not.
That's correct. Somebody asked if our CPE qualified for it because we were NASBA and they've got an EA working for them. And I said, you know, it costs $400 and some to get on the IRS's list, $428 or something crazy. So I said probably not.
Any more discussion on this?
Would, in the future, if this came up again, would taking CPE be a requirement?
Possibly. I mean, I think that in my mind, the lack of work experience probably would be one of the reasons for the CPE. I mean, I was just thinking about that person. I mean, she's worked at H&R Block for just a year, I think is what it said. Other than that, there's no documentation what she did the other 9 years. And I think that at least the feedback I've got from our discussions have been that, you know, our concern is that, you know, we're protecting the profession by having adequately knowledgeable and trained CPAs when we grant their licenses. That's kind of my thought. I would say yes, I would hope so, but I think that if somebody came in, they've been working as a audit staff for 10 years or something like that, and they're having to get 40 hours of Yellow Book or you know, A&A CPE every year. I mean, to me, then I wouldn't say, well, we're going to go get 80 more. But I think in a situation like this where it's someone that hasn't really had very much experience, at least I'm basing on what's here, I mean, then I personally would feel like the CPE is a good idea, but I still think it's going to be case by case on that. More discussion? So we have a motion, we have a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? All right. Next item we have is a process change for our firm permit renewals. Wendy, I'll let you talk about this.
Okay, thank you. Okay, currently, when firms renew, we're heading into renewal season right now, and when firms renew their license, they go online, pay a fee, and they automatically receive that renewal. Something that I've noticed after reviewing laws, rules, etc., is that there are some stipulations those firms should meet prior to receiving that renewal. One of them is that the firm should submit an ownership form each year. And also, the firm, if they perform a test work, must be enrolled in a peer review program. So what I would like to suggest is that these firm renewals come through a process where the staff approves them prior to them getting a license. And that would give us the opportunity to ensure that they are meeting the requirements of the statute. The first would be that when they renew, they would have the opportunity to upload their firm ownership form during the renewal process. And we would ensure they have that on file as required by the statute. And the second would be if they indicate that they're in a test firm, providing me with the period ending of their last engagement issued and then the period ending of their last peer review to determine and then compare that with the enrollment records I have access to with regards to peer review. And what this would achieve would be the firms would not be issued their renewal permit until those items were verified. In the past, it's been extremely difficult for Karen to keep up with the firm ownership forms that come in from the 2,000 firms and then to ensure that everybody submitted them as they were required to. We've also, I think, seen a bit of a problem in the past maintaining appropriate records from the peer review side as well, ensuring that all firms are enrolled as they attest that they are and are required to by statute. So I approached Ben on this matter on whether we could do this, and he felt we had the statutory authority to do this, but thought that we ought to run those items by you all to see what concerns you may have or if this presents problems that we are unaware of.
Thinking of press release, I mean, not press release or emails, whatever, to the firms identifying that need, because I know that a lot of people wait till December the 31st at whatever to do it, and do we have time? The other concern is, do we have time with IT department to make those modifications to the website by the end of the year? I mean, I would think we did, but I think it's a great idea.
We have not fully evaluated that. I've been giving the initial inclination that yes, we can make those changes, but we haven't delved into specifics yet. So I suppose there's a chance that we could find a problem that we can't make it happen as quickly as we would need to. But initially, I've been told that yes, I can submit an IT request and we ought to be able to make this work.
More discussion on this item? So I assume you need a recommendation whether or not to recommend this process change to the board.
Yes, I think I would like to receive your recommendation of approving this change.
So you want to make a motion to do that? I'll recommend that or I'll move that we recommend to the board acceptance of this process change for firm permit renewals. Have a second?
I'll second that.
Any more discussion? All in favor, say aye. All opposed? All right, the last item we have is state-specific ethics course approval. Reaffirm suspension from the October 2014 meeting. We have correspondence from Charles Frazier from Lipscomb University. And then we have another request by American CPE to provide state-specific ethics courses. So it's a lot of stuff, I guess, Gus. This may mess my 10-minute projection up. So I'm going to ask for an extension of time on that without CPE requirement. I guess the first thing we need to address, in my opinion, is the letter. I know we've been discussing this for some time, and the letter from Mr. Frazier, I don't know that he's asking. I guess he's more asking about if this is true, but I don't know that there's 100% it's factually correct. I know we've discussed different things and may have alluded to different things, but I don't know that we've ever landed anywhere specifically as far as granting anybody a quote-unquote monopoly on CPE, state-specific CPE. I know we've put a hold on granting new providers while we try to decide how to proceed forward. So I'll just open up for discussion if anybody has anything they want to contribute on this.
Mr. Chairman, let me interject that I visited, after seeing a copy of the letter from Charles Fraser, spoke to him to better understand or to clarify some of the information he has in the letter. And I don't think it's ever been a proposal that the state board give exclusive ethics CPE rights to the Tennessee Society. After discussing with him that our concern has been the quality, we've granted permission to a number of organizations to provide ethics courses, but we have no way of really monitoring the quality of those ethics courses, and that that we've done a review of some of them, or all of them, did we?
Didn't we pass a new policy that requires that we evaluate those on an annual basis, if I'm not mistaken?
And I think we've gone through one. Don and Ray, is that correct? Have we gone through and reviewed the ethics courses? Didn't you fellows do a review of the ethics courses of certain providers?
Their initial application?
No.
Yes. Oh, we have not reviewed them since, no.
Boy, I thought at the last meeting you reported, or at a recent meeting you reported that certain licensed ethics providers had been reviewed.
I seem to remember that too, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah.
What I recall was, and maybe Karen can help us here, but there was an audit where they were requested to send in information about their course and participation, and I can't remember the factors that were included in that, but it was mainly a staff-driven exercise of collecting the data to see if there was any discrepancies or items that stood out.
I had understood it to be a far more broad quality review of the ethics providers and the courses that they presented. But in any case, going back to Charles Fraser's letter, he understands now that discussions in the past was that we had a keen interest in having a ethics course developed by the Tennessee Society in collaboration with the NASBA and with this board, and that it would be available in addition to those other courses that other providers had, but that the society course was not an exclusive or arrangement. Correct me if, well, anyway, Charles said that he apologized for the misunderstanding that he had. He had no major problem with us proceeding along those lines, and that he just wanted to make sure that Perry Moore and Lipscomb could continue to provide an ethics course. And I said, as far as I knew, that certainly had never been an agenda of this board to preclude anybody from doing it. And in fact, as I understand it, it's that course that they provide is exemplary, that it's some of the courses is just a recitation of law and rules, but they actually truly make it into an ethics course. So, as far as I'm aware, Charles is okay with the agenda as we're pursuing it.
I guess with that, would the committee like to consider request by American CPE to provide state-specific ethics courses? Have they I guess they've submitted an application?
Yes, and I informed them that the board had placed a suspension on approving additional providers at their October 2014 meeting, and that I would bring it to this meeting, but did not know if it would be considered or not.
I guess hearing kind of what Bill said, and I agree with him that we really don't need to do anything if we're going to maintain the current policy we have. We'll just let the price will set the market, and so to speak. If TSCPA wants to provide ethics, that's fine, and if they're based on their price and the quality, we'll just decide. If there's other people that want to compete there as well, then they're obviously welcome to. And I think we just keep our rules. My recommendation would be we keep our rules as they are and continue to evaluate applications as they come in for state-specific CPE. Does anybody disagree with that?
I don't think that's what we agreed to do, is it? I mean, that's what Wendy just said. We put a moratorium or a suspension on looking at any new applications until we
Decided.
could resolve where we were going to head with this thing. I know that ought to have a state-specific ethics course that we are familiar with the content, and it's really very tightly controlled as to what's in that course, and it's something that every licensee has to take before their renewal process. I think the open it up and let others into the playing field too, but that's one CPE course that's related strictly to our laws and rules, and it's one that ought to control more than any other CPE course that
Can I ask for a little history here? Was there a problem in the past on some people having courses that weren't good quality on ethics, or what caused this discussion?
And I'm not a big participant in the debate here, except I've been to a number of ethics courses, more than I would care to, remember.
Is that because you were required to, or?
It was penalty?
Yeah. But there's a difference in the content and the presentation. I mean, there just really is. I mean, Bill just mentioned the one that's done by the Lipscomb professor. Great presenter, but I didn't really take anything away from that. I mean, it was more war stories about incidents that come up, and there's nothing really there. I mean, it's just, it filled up an hour, at a luncheon presentation, but that's not what this course ought to be about. It ought to be about a required course every 2 years. It ought to be related to our Tennessee law.
I mean, they do submit an outline. Is that correct? I mean, the process now for when we have a provider, they submit an outline of the materials and the course material.
Yeah, for example, the one that was submitted for today, I thought I would take it as an opportunity to show you where having a limited number of providers may keep the quality more in line. As I flip through this particular course that was submitted, in general, it definitely covers the laws and rules in this state. However, I did find minor inconsistencies that start to make me wonder if a licensee could misunderstand something. And I highlighted the examples in this particular case, some of them very minor. The links to our website are inaccurate. Some of the fees noted either are not properly, a replacement certificate's $25. Well, that's not actually true. If you want to get a duplicate wall certificate, it's $25. Again, some of these are really minor, but they also have a notification of intent to practice fee of $50. We're unable to find that anywhere. I don't know where they grabbed that information from.
I believe I know, Wendy. This fellow is based in Texas, and Texas does have a notification of intent to practice.
Okay, so pre-mobility potentially. It refers to this board having a substance abuse program, which from my,
Substance abuse?
yes. So from my history of attending these board meetings, I do believe at one point in time that this board discussed potentially having such a program, but never implemented anything, or that I'm aware of. You know, in the peer review section, they talk about that you have to have your initial review completed by August 31st. Well, it doesn't, and it talks about this board having a program. Well, this board doesn't have a program anymore. So there's just a few things that someone who's not closely monitored, some of these things could get out there being a little inconsistent. And we can certainly ask them to fix these things, but the more and more providers you get, the harder it is to control these types of things.
There also a discussion when we made that thing that we'd put that on for, and put the renewal process of every 2 years, that your approval was good for 2 years?
You know, as we're sitting here discussing, what I have written down, or what I've seen in minutes, is that you all had requested somewhat of a 2-year expiration on current programs. We chatted, Ben and I talked a lot about how that would work in a rule. And it presented some issues, meaning when you reapply, do you have to set parameters and such? And if do you want to address that?
I thought the intention was, though, that we would just treat it just like we do a CPA license renewal. They would have, in theory, a CPE examination where we check to make sure that they're compliant, and then reissue the approval there. I think, because I think I made the motion on that, and that we did that. I mean, that, to me, that was kind of the spirit of what we were intending to do, was to put some quality control on there, so we don't get providers that just go off in left field and it just gets watered down more.
Certainly, Mr. Eldridge. And I, you know, that was my 4th week here, so I do remember that request. And in our discussions, it's not that we can't do it; we wouldn't be happy to do it. It's the reality of the situation is, okay, we'll have to set an extension date for the ones that are already approved, because we can't just yank them out from underneath them, which is fine, and that's normal. 2, we're going to have to come up with, obviously, a process and application, and then requirements that things be in there. And 3, we have to find guidelines to either approve or disapprove of them. So, for example, if we look at this particular applicant right here, how many mistakes or discrepancies is going to be sufficient to disapprove it? We're going to have to come up with a guideline, and that's very difficult. And I know that Mr. Glandorf and Mr. Driver had a conversation with regard to this. We all had. And that Mr. Driver said, there is nothing in the rules to say that you can't just say, Tennessee SCPA, you're the provider, with the exceptions of, I believe you mentioned some other programs from Lipscomb that was exemplary. Is that correct? There's a couple different ways we can do it. We could say, hey, these are the main ones, and then we could do a list or whatever. But once we open up the door of qualifying folks, we have to have parameters with which to qualify them or disapprove them. And that's
providers do we have right now?
That I could not tell you.
There are 18 on the list.
And so how do we determine whether or not they're good or not from the start? obviously we have some quality control measures in place, and we have some, we're basing it on something. I mean,
My
we don't just
understanding
say,
is
hey,
that-
sign up and you can do it, right?
There's a very general outline that covers the main highlights in the laws and rules, and if they touch on those. I will say that looking at the one that we've received, it's a regurgitation for the most part of the laws and rules, or anything they've grabbed off our website, or something of that nature. So typically, if they cover the items that are in the outline, then they are okay. I went through this one pretty specifically just to see.
I may be unpopular saying this, but I guess I just have a problem putting some limitation on who can and who can't apply. To me, that seems like you're getting
Well, anyone can
selective.
apply. It's whether or not the board's going to approve it.
right, and that's what we've done in the past, and that was kind of my point when I said, really, if we take that route that I was interpreting, there's really nothing we need to do other than we can lift the hold on any new applicants, and the price would set the market. I mean, and also the reputation of the program, if it's boring or not, or if it's good or not. I mean, and that's kind of the capitalism, I guess, where people have the opportunity to provide the best product they want at the best price. I don't know. I guess maybe that's just the unpopular opinion I have, but I just think that, I would have it hard limiting the people.
In prep, about a month or so ago, as Wendy and I were discussing this and working on some of this, I did do a state survey of all the states surrounding us, and there are provider registration. I didn't find any content registration. And that was every state that touches Tennessee. And it's not to say that we shouldn't do it. It's just that I was looking for examples as to how to do it. And, one thing we can maybe take in mind is, remember the issue we were just discussing regarding the extension of the examination 10-year window? We could just say everybody has to submit their materials every 2 years, and it's at the sole discretion of the board whether to approve or disapprove. And that way the board has full authority
That's
to
what I thought we
disapprove
were
or approve
doing,
it.
based on that
that's like
change.
an easy, quick.
That's what I thought we were doing when we made that rule change to review it every 2 years. We were checking the content. We were going to check. Obviously, y'all would check it detail.
I think maybe perhaps there was confusion as to whether the board was going to be checking the content or whether board staff. And if it's board staff, there's going to have
Y'all
to
would
be.
check it, and we would
But then there's going to
ratify
have
it.
to be
Is that
some
right?
sort of.
Staff
Yeah.
is to review it.
There, if it's with the staff, then there's going to have to be set parameters within the rules.
If the staff had a problem, they would bring it to the board.
Right.
Or that was my understanding.
That way, I think that maybe the words I read were expiration, and maybe that's where I.
So if the board were to make a recommendation, it would be, and please tell me if I am wrong, 2-year expiration, resubmitting of the materials, staff checks for compliance with the rules. I mean, because I know you also said whether or not the particular program was boring or well attended, or I don't know. I don't know
I'm not evaluating based on that. I'm just saying
Right.
that in a free market, that's what controls whether it's going to
Certainly.
be successful or not. If I've got a program and it sucks,
in proximity to the geographical location.
and
I
it
mean,
costs
something down the
$1,000
street.
an hour, I mean, I'm probably not going to get a whole lot of clients or customers, and so it's going to deteriorate. It's going to go away. If I've got a great program that's got a great price on it, then I'm probably going to thrive and have a great program.
Why would we want to do it every 2 years? That seems a little excessive to me.
I think it was, again, I'm going back a few meetings. I think it was, we had to put some time limit on there, and I figured 2 years, the rules change. I mean, I don't know if, I guess our ethics don't change, but just to make sure that they don't, that was the number we came up with. It just seemed like a reasonable 2-year renewal process for your CPA license, it'd be a 2-year renewal process for this process. I mean, I don't care if that's 2 or whatever, but that's what I thought was in place already. My understanding is the only thing we've done differently is we've just put a hold on any new vendors being approved or not. And then we did implement this quality control process, what, 2 or 3 meetings ago? 2 meetings ago?
Right, but it appears that there is some confusion as what quality control and what our investigators were pursuing are. You're saying that you didn't review the content.
Here's the minute, Mr. Chairman. I don't know how I ended up with them, but here's.
Board members agreed that no new state ethics applications would be accepted, and staff will audit 50% of the existing programs. I guess the question is, what constitutes an audit? TSCPA was asked to continue their development of the program. A decision regarding placing expiration dates on existing state ethics programs will be made at the May meeting. Audit results. And I had understood audit meant a quality review.
Sir, if I could, Denise Hickerson, who is our CPE coordinator on staff, did review 50% of the providers, and that was presented at the subsequent meeting.
This may be a dumb question, and I'm certainly not recommending that she do that because I couldn't imagine it, but did she actually sit through 50% of the programs? So just reviewing what they submitted originally?
Yes, she reviewed the course materials, and she requested that they send in any evaluations
Gotcha.
and attendance records.
She wouldn't be working for us if she went through 50 hours of CPE.
To me, the thing that's missing here is we put the moratorium on new applications in order to give the, I guess, TSCPA time to fully develop their proposal for presenting an ethics CPE course. And I think that takes a little time to do that because it was going to be done in collaboration with NAP. I think we ought to maybe
So if, let's say they develop a great program that meets everything we want, what are we looking to do? I mean, what about these other providers? What do we tell them? And I think that's where the question in this letter.
I think it was, and maybe this comment was made, it's not our mission to provide a marketplace for people out there. You know, we need to be concerned about the laws and rules affecting the accounting profession in Tennessee, and this is one course that we have made a required course that relates to those laws and rules, and it's to control very tightly the content of that course, you know, to make it the right course, the right content, and you know, we're
But we are controlling the content of the course because we required these quality review audits, though. We're doing that already.
Yeah, but we've just proved through what Wendy said. I mean, I don't sit down and review those, and I suspect, you know, it probably took you quite a bit of time to go through and verify some of those things. Just an example to see other courses. You know, what should the course be? Should it be the course that the professor from Lipscomb did that was very different from the course that Mark Crocker did? You know, and I guess the one that you all do, Don. Totally different approach. And which one do we want as our staff has put on is much more appropriate, you know, for
Well, and I think that could be part of the problem, is that what does this board want the course to be? Yeah. It's called an ethics course, and what I'm hearing described and what I've seen is it's really a law and rules course rather than ethics. Right. The Lipscomb course is more ethics oriented, or I don't know. I've never been to it. I don't know.
I'm not sure what it was.
But I guess
I'm really not. I mean, you know, it's entertaining.
Kara is willing to speak on behalf of the TSCPA if you would like to.
Why don't you introduce Kara, please?
This is Kara Fitzgerald. She is the CFO with the Tennessee Society of CPAs.
I'll be brief, but I do want to update you on where we stand with our program. You're correct that it does take time to develop such a program. This summer, we started working with Doug Warren and Jim Myers, who are members from East Tennessee. They developed our last ethics program, and we started working with them to update the content. Doug was recorded a couple of months ago, and we have that live now, available as our updated Tennessee state-specific ethics 2-hour course. We are still working on the process of our desire is to create a high-quality interactive course that covers not only the laws and rules, but also ethics. And we have purchased the software to do that and have been reviewing the content that NASBA has provided to the state societies. Right now they have 8 resources out there. It's some case studies, e-courses, things like that. Met with Alfonso Alexander from NASBA last week. They are working on kind of an ethics model right now, which he was hoping to have released to the state societies by the 15th, which has passed now. Hopefully that will be out by the end of this month. But what's interesting about that new resource is that it really is more on ethics and taking you through a series of questions and exercises on specific situations that you as a CPA may encounter. It was probably the best resource that I've seen out of all of those that NASBA has put out for our use so far. We are facing a challenge with these NASBA resources, and other state societies have concurred with us in that the way that they have built these resources, they are only able to be used on the platform that the vendors have made them, have created them. And so to take those resources and integrate them into other content that we have, whether that's a recording of Doug Warren presenting the laws and rules or what have you, there are some challenges there just from a technology standpoint. I clarified those issues that we are facing and other states are facing to Alfonso, and he seemed committed to work with the vendors and see what might be able to be done to make those more usable for the state societies. But I have my doubts as to how long that will take and whether or not they can meet the needs of 50 individual state societies. However, we will continue to work with them because I do think they have some good content available. So long story short, we have an updated course available. It's not the interactive course that we ultimately want to create, but we are still going down that path to create that. And I'm happy to answer any questions you guys might have.
What's the cost of that course?
The cost of our current online course, I believe, is $55.
Does it cost anything more for someone who's not a society member to take that course?
I don't think so. I think that for our CPE courses, normally there is a non-member fee, but for that one, I don't think that there is, but I will double check that.
I guess any more discussion? I honestly not exactly sure where we stand right now. I mean, I know where we stand is our policy. We're just on hold with the current providers.
And I think, just speaking for myself, I'm anxious to find out what the society comes up with and see, as I think has been referred to, if it's a superior product, the market will go to that. And it doesn't mean that the other ones aren't acceptable. And it sounds like that there are a variety of versions of this that meet the ethics requirement, and buyer who chooses which route to follow.
And we're talking about Tennessee specific, so
Yes.
you know they're trying to blend general ethics in with Tennessee specific rules, and we just need to be sure whatever product that we have.
Again, I think there's
Yeah.
need to better understand whether this is a course on law and rules, which you can just read on the internet. You don't have to have somebody stand up in front and read them to you. Or whether you get into the question of ethics, when do you resign from a client, et cetera. So.
Not on the committee, but I agree with the chairman. It seems to me like we would continue to let the society work through what the course they want before we decided to lift our moratorium. It seems like that would be a reasonable approach. It sounds like a really good product, and it's something that I think will help us make a better decision.
I believe we don't need any action on this. If I'm correct. Does anybody disagree with that? Continue. Any other items to discuss?
Are you, is one of your goals on this committee is to have it be the longest committee on record?
We quit getting 9 or 10 items on there. Maybe we can put a moratorium on how many agenda items we can have. 3. No other discussion items? No other ridiculing items? Committee's adjourned.
Thank you, Stephen. Oh, pardon me, Casey. I'm sorry.
It's been so long, my computer quit. I've got to reboot here.
What they say about you?
Yeah. Let's go ahead and call the Enforcement Committee to order, and I think we got 2 agenda items. One is the legal report, but before that, we've got the
I think it's actually titled Status of Open Complaints is what you're looking for.
status of open complaints, and let's look at that first. And I would ask our, actually this report is from Don Mills, and ask him if he's got any comments, and then also our legal counsel. But if you go to page 2, the first page is just a transmittal letter. Page 2 is actually the status of open complaints. And you can see there at October 15th, we've got 12 cases in litigation monitoring, 4 where formal charges are authorized, no cases set for formal hearing, 17 we've got consent order proposed, legal has got 12, and then 11 are in. Total number is 64. That is down from 94 in July and 117 in April. And same time you folks got it, and I would just ask Don and or legal counsel, assume the decline in number of cases because of the TPIN issue and the fact that we are no longer pursuing those as vigorously as we once were.
Asking me? Yes, sir.
Okay, I mean,
I think it's a combination of a variety of things. Is one, there was a surge of staff complaints opened as a result of the PTIN. In addition to the professional privilege tax, there's a swelling of those as well. And since the last meeting, when the board indicated that it would no longer want to open those up, that has reflected here in the decline.
okay.
Describe to me what litigation monitoring means.
What that means is that the particular respondent is involved in either a civil or criminal matter which is still pending. And so as opposed to us utilizing board resources and time to investigate this, we will let that action go forward, and the particular respondent has signed an order agreeing to provide us with any and all documentation resulting from that and to keep us apprised of any changes.
But that really doesn't currently require investigator time or your
No,
time.
sir, not 1 minute.
And then when it comes down to consent orders, so that's proposed, that's what comes to us to approve a consent order.
Yes, sir. So when on the legal report, well, I think we have a handful of them. That's the consent order where we are asking the respondent to agree to this particular course of action in lieu of us setting formal charges in the hearing.
What does legal mean?
I've never actually seen this before.
Don created this.
Legal is actually consists of cases that he has just received that have come back from response from the respondent, and it also ones that are getting ready to go out to investigation, and it also is the cases that have gone from investigation back to legal. So it's really just a composite of everything on his desk.
Whose desk?
On legal's desk.
This is the general counsel for the board.
So how many cases are each of you involved with actively today? Ray, could you speak up?
I have 3.
Does that require full-time attention?
I just got them, so it will.
So what were you doing before you got them?
I was doing about 6 others. I just got all those closed out for this meeting.
So does the 3 that you have, is that a full-time job?
It is, yes. And we've changed some of the rules on some of the investigations, so it will be. Yes, sir.
On how many do you have working?
Got 8. Well, I've also, you got to remember that we haven't had any new, the core reports. I'm working backward from reports that were in August 31st from RBS and taking what we've got on spreadsheets and trying to combine them. But that's as close as I could get right now. We've also, anything that has been referred to from legal back to us is in there.
You have a full load?
Not as full as 130 cases I used to have, but.
Question is, are we overstaffed or understaffed?
That's not my judgment call.
You're on the scene, the battlefront. Do you feel like you're overworked?
I don't think so. You know, I mean, do I do 37.5 hours a week? Not usually. But, you know, it's not as chaotic as it used to be in the old days, where I was doing, 70 and 80.
I'm trying to better understand, we approved a second investigator 4 years ago, and the then executive director said we didn't need a second investigator. But the board, it was approved by the regulatory commissioner and approved by the board. And with the caseload going down, my question is, are our needs for a second investigator greater today or less than they were 4 years ago?
Asking one of us to give it up?
Yes. No, I'm asking your opinion. I'm asking your opinion.
I should keep my job or not. I think we both try to work hard and do a good job.
I think the board, and while we're in a committee hearing, all the board members are here that are going to be here tomorrow, and all I'm trying to do is to help the board understand we have direct responsibility over the hiring and employment of the executive director and the two and investigators. And I'm just trying to figure out how we do our job to understand what you're doing.
One of the things we don't know is what's in the pipeline, what hasn't been given to us yet. I know that right now they're doing CPE audits, and I understand there's about 30 people who have not complied. So those may eventually come to us as well.
So they're referred to the investigators to pursue. Have we done that in the past?
Mm-hmm.
Karen is gone. Go ahead.
I believe so. I have seen some opened, but we go through a process of doing as much as we can to get them to comply. So it would ultimately be our decision whether to open a complaint or not.
And that's to utilize that particular kind of complaint, you either have your CPE or you don't. There's not,
I mean, what
not
is
to
there
disparage the quality of
what is there
investigators,
to
but
investigate?
yeah, it's like with the professional privilege tax. You paid it or you didn't.
Right.
So, and if we do, opening a complaint does associate with the cost backs, the chargebacks, or whatever. And quite frankly, if it's something that simple, if someone said, if Department of Revenue says somebody didn't pay the professional privilege tax, that's it, done. If we do an audit and there's not enough CPE in your record, you didn't submit enough, albeit unless we made a mistake, that's it. We will, I mean, it's not a lot, there's not a lot to investigate with those particular ones. Now, to answer his question with regard to things that are in the pipeline, I do have 2 on my desk that I was doing some research on yesterday, which will be pushed out to the investigators next week. And then I believe there's probably another additional handful that we reviewed this week at our monthly complaint meeting and some last week. But we've got to go through the SOP, and that takes a couple weeks before it ever ends up back to me.
Ray, are you able to handle audit investigations?
And some of the less complicated ones, let's say.
I just think it's an issue that the board ought to consider. It shouldn't be just my concern or interest, but I think it's something that the board ought to pursue on a going forward basis to better understand the workload and how you work with the executive director and how you work with the attorney.
More complex ones, I would work with Don, consult with him, so I could at least do the footwork and the interviews and the gathering of the papers and all.
But the whole issue of investigator workload is something that I would just suggest that you continue to work with Wendy and with legal counsel. So, anyway.
Okay, thanks, Bill.
Can I ask a quick question?
Can we know? Go ahead.
You go.
No, I was just saying you could always put these reviews of these state-specific ethics courses on there, and that would give them some additional things to do during the day.
So on the litigation monitoring, that's an open complaint. Then it goes into litigation monitoring. When you get something back, do you reopen that complaint or do you open a new complaint? Like
The complaint's never closed out.
Okay.
It's just in a holding pattern. So, for example, I believe the last time, this is very old at this point in time, but we've got some that will end up being year, 2, 3 years old because, I mean, sometimes these things are big class action suits and they can take several years to adjudicate.
Right. My concern is that on the cost back conversation we had a while ago, it seems to me very interesting how that percentage is charged back to us. And I certainly don't want to incentivize fewer complaints being opened if we need to, which is what I'm afraid that policy may cause us to do if we end up going into some type of we've missed the budget. But it seems to me like if there's opportunities for us not to open complaint, if we can still take some type of action, there may be some benefit to that for us in the future. And I don't know how we do that, but I want to make sure we're certainly not opening 2 for one issue.
Oh, and the other point is that if there is a excessive workload, we can get engage outside resources to help the investigators.
Okay, let's go to the legal report. Does everybody have a hard copy of the legal report?
My apologies for the hard copy. When you guys said you wanted more information in the legal report, I actually included some things you probably did not want. So the hard copy was a catching of that. And
I think everyone received this in advance of the meeting, and the cases here have been grouped together. Cases 1 through 7 have been reviewed by legal counsel and have been recommended that we close the complaint. I have read this thing a couple of times. I do not have any issues or questions on any of the first 7 cases. They look to be straightforward. Document here. Does anyone want to review these one by one? If not, I would entertain a motion that we approve legal counsel's recommendation on the first 7 cases.
So moved.
Got a motion?
You got a motion and a second.
A motion, second. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, let's look at case number 8 on page 4, bottom of page 4. That's cases recommended letter of information. This is a situation where I think a firm had actually established an executive office in Brentwood, Tennessee. It appears there was no one actually working in the office. It was so they could have a Tennessee address and phone number. Investigation revealed that they talked to the partner in California that they did not have a firm permit, but they have since obtained a firm permit, and so the case is being recommended to be closed with a letter of information. So, any questions on that one? Anything to add from legal counsel, or?
Just basically, the letter of information would just remind them of the law and rules regarding firm permits and what firms can and cannot do and what they need to do in order to do that.
Okay, let's go on to the recommended letters of warning.
Mr. Stewart, are you going to make a motion to approve number 8, or are you going to do another batch of several of
I'm
them?
gonna add some more to that.
Okay,
We can
that's
do, let's
fine.
go ahead and do it. Let's go ahead and do it.
I just
by
want to make sure we
group.
don't forget.
Motion
Second.
approved, second. Okay, any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, case number 9 on page 5. These have been recommended for letters of warning, and it's a situation, I think, where a complaint was filed on a former employee of a firm. The employee had actually taken some clients, a couple of clients. The complaint alleged that he was using printers and paper and computer in doing work for the clients. I guess the investigation revealed that there was the firm did not have a non-compete agreement. The complainant alleged that really it came down to the respondent's conduct reflected adversely on the profession, and the investigative report indicated at the very least the behavior was unethical, but a search of the respondent's files found no previous complaints or disciplinary actions of the board. Case is recommended for to be closed on issuance of a letter of warning. I might ask legal counsel.
That pilfering a former employer's clients and using their resources for your work to be done at home is probably not advisable.
Can I ask a question about that?
Sure.
So, from my reading these 2 paragraphs, I didn't take from it that there was any proof that they use firm resources to pilfer the clients.
Just to elaborate, there was no non-compete agreement.
Right.
The client that the respondent now has was a former client, and it may have appeared as though she undercut prices.
So is the conclusion?
She did take a client from this particular company.
Right, but without a non-compete, my question, I guess, is, and I don't know the answer to this, but is that unethical? I'm asking. In the CPA profession in Tennessee, is that unethical?
While she's working for the particular company, mind you, it wasn't after the fact. It was while she was working for this company, she took this client and was doing that work at home. And they said that they found emails and print-offs from at their office location with regard to the work she was doing at home for this taken client.
Really no basis for us doing anything other than closing this case. I mean, I question even where the letter of warning is. Business issue between her and her former employer, and I'm told that non-compete agreements really aren't enforceable. You can't keep some. Anyway, I don't think there's anything wrong with a letter of warning.
Happy to close it, whatever you guys want.
Have any thoughts on that? I mean, let's go to case number 12.
So is that one is that one going to be recommended for closure or a letter of warning?
Yeah, it's going to be, the complaint will be closed on the issuance of a letter of warning, yeah. All right, case number 10, the top of page 6. Again, this is to do with professional privilege tax. The respondent actually now paid the professional privilege tax in full, and the has provided the appropriate paperwork to go inactive, and verified that fact, and so she has paid all past professional privilege tax. So again, we would close up on the issuance of a letter of warning, and I assume that letter of warning would just be reminding her of the need to pay professional privilege tax if she does become active again.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
And just to remind, these two were left over from a while ago. This is not, they were not open in contradiction to the board not wanting to pursue these any longer. We're just wrapping up old stuff.
Case number 11, again, this is a professional privilege tax situation. I believe this respondent has now paid his professional privilege tax through his current employer, and he tax plus full penalties, and he has no other complaints in file, so we're recommending the case be closed upon the issuance of a letter of warning. Questions on these three cases? Okay, I'll entertain a motion. We approve legal counsel's recommendation.
So moved.
Got a motion? Second. And a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? 12 and 13 deal with recommended consent. Case number 12 is to do with the respondent's firm not having a peer review. His firm apparently now has re-enrolled in the peer review program. Is for formal hearing for the revocation of the respondent's firm permit with the authority to settle via consent order upon the respondent's payment of a civil penalty in the amount of $3,000, and that's $1,000 for each entire month not enrolled after March 30, 2015. I had a question on this one is, what happens with the peer review they should have had? Enroll in the program, do they have to have a peer review immediately, or?
Yes, when a firm re-enrolls in the peer review program, and they were dropped from the program for non-compliance, they're required to have a peer review within 90 days.
That would be, they would have to do that, and they'll have this civil money penalty, assuming
he agrees.
Okay.
And typically, it would be for the period they were supposed to have the review. You know, if it was supposed to be for the period ending June 2014, that's what they would do.
Anybody have any questions on?
I have one. So was there thought that it's going to take 3 months to get them through the peer review process? So that puts them, what, 6 months late technically? So is there thought to doing $1,000 a month for those additional 3 months until it was actually done?
You're asking me if I had thought that, or why?
Yeah, because it looks like what we've had is they were supposed to have the peer review completed by the end of March. They've enrolled 3 months later, so we're penalizing for those 3 months, but it won't actually be done for 3 more months. So was there a thought to be given to look at the entire
sure.
time?
Yeah, absolutely. And we have the discretion to, it's up to $1,000 per day per violation. You know, we could be looking at $180,000 if we wanted to. I mean, I don't necessarily think that that's what we should do. But I've got to come up with some sort of a way to calculate it. And sometimes I look at, all right, well, it's supposed to be done by the end of March. It wasn't. He was delinquent for an additional several months until he was finally re-enrolled. Let's hit him for each one of those months that he wasn't enrolled. There's not a lot of science to the, you know. I've got to come up with something.
It's also probably very difficult to determine. He probably could turn around and have a peer review within a couple weeks. So although he's not required to have it until 90 days after he re-enrolls, he could be on it, and it's difficult for us to determine until it's accepted by the committee exactly how long that took.
So would it be, I may be beating a dead horse, I'm sorry if I am, but would it be possible then to change this instead of a fixed amount, we say $1,000 a month until it's completed, to incentivize them to do it quickly instead of waiting? And I ask that only because this has happened, this is apparently the third time this has happened with this same firm.
Certainly, absolutely. We can, the fun with the consent orders is we can do a lot, you know, so I can absolutely write that into there. Whether he accepts it or not, it's a whole other thing. Is typically these consent orders are really just, they're agreeing to this. So it's really an agreement more than it is anything, more than it is an order. And so when they then violate this agreement, then it brings it back within the board's jurisdiction to initiate formal charges at a hearing.
And you have obviously extensive experience with this. I mean, do you think that's too much of an overreach? Do you think that's too harsh if we did something like that? Or do you think there's a benefit in trying to incentivize them to go quicker in the 90-day period than waiting to the end? Or is it even outside of their control?
I think the acceptance of that peer review is outside of their control. They could turn around and have it done in two weeks, let's say, but then it has to go through a technical review process, a committee process, so we can't verify that anything's been done, and it could be 120 days later they have that long, meaning the committee, et cetera, has that long in order to finalize that. So,
I mean, we would run the risk of his discipline increasing based upon actions that these other folks could very well take.
Yeah, and I was just talking about until he submits it. Let that be the cutoff date, because that's what he could do. I just didn't know if he thought that was egregious.
I guess he could provide proof that he's submitted it.
Yeah, or
But-
could the society let somebody know on the board that it's been
I think
submitted?
we should put it on him, on this particular
Okay.
respondent.
Okay. Yeah. I
You know.
obviously know nothing about the in and outs of how that happens on a daily basis. So.
The society cannot. They're
Okay.
prohibited from telling us that information.
You know, it's troubling that this individual had problems twice before, and I guess was he able to, anywhere in that process, avoid having a peer review in any of those prior years? Had this case the first time, I thought this guy has really become an artist at learning how to avoid peer review altogether. But
You know, the procedures within the peer review program itself, they work very hard to make sure that people can't skip a requirement. And so in this case, again, if he had missed a review, they most likely will go back and make him have a review on the period that he missed, and then he gets 3 years from that point to have the next one. So he won't get to have it as of today and wait another 3 years. You know, so they do their best at attempting to the best of their ability. Now, if someone goes 6 years without having a peer review, it's very difficult to go back 6 years. Standards are different, all that kind of thing. So you typically have to pick a current period. But sometimes even the committee will say they'll accelerate the next one since they were, you know, did not have it for 6 years like they were supposed to. So they work hard to make sure that everyone's on a level playing field if they can.
did you want to make any recommendation to change the penalty, or are you okay
It
with
was just an idea that I had. If the committee's not interested, I think we can move on. That's fine.
Okay, let's go to case number 13, and
Can I ask a question? So were we limiting the time frame for how long that $1,000 would be in place? $1,000 a month? Because I think Wendy was saying some of that time would be out of that person's control.
Yeah, I think what I was asking is if there's a way we could verify the date he submitted it, because that's what he could control.
Right,
But
yeah.
you know, it's so confidential and everything
that's
else, it may not
the route
be.
we're
Well, no,
going.
unless the committee wants to do that. Otherwise, I would just drop it and leave it as they have it. But if you all think that's a good idea,
I think that's a good idea because some of that is out of that person's control. Because they can't really control that 120 days that AICPA reviewer has.
the way it's currently drafted, though, it would only be until it would
Cover the 3 months that he was not enrolled in a peer
Right.
review program.
So if we changed
So-
it, it would actually go up higher than $3,000. But
I thought that was your proposal.
yeah, it was, but I didn't know if y'all wanted to do that or not. Don't think it's worth dying over. So if y'all don't think so, I'm happy to move on. So
Oh, what's going on now? Wendy, what's your recommendation? You know, he can be enrolled. Is how much of that is within his control that we could put anything punitive to, or do we need to?
she just said that it would just be into the date that he submitted everything, and after that, it could be 120 days out of his control. The issue would be we'd have to basically accept a declaration from him or something that he actually had submitted everything.
Some sort of proof that society can't tell us, but you could require him to submit proof that it was submitted. Because the issue is he could enroll in the program, be due it in 90 days for peer review, and you hit day 89 and not done it yet. And then he has to go through a series of letters to warn him that you haven't done it and you got to do it. And so, you know, he could string that out as well. So there's both sides of the coin. He could get on it and be concerned about the problems that he's faced, or he could string it along again and not submit it. And then the program has to go, the site has to go through a process of dropping him again, which takes time.
Help the society out a little bit if we did it. You know.
I with the history, I mean, with this and had a problem twice before. I kind of like Gabe's idea
Yeah,
that you put a
I
second
did
part in
too.
it. You got this $1,000 for a month that you're not enrolled, and then for not, you know, completing it in the required time frame, you got another one.
I mean,
So
I
that
would-
he's got the incentive to let's not do this again.
I do believe they need the incentive. I also believe that whatever fine that their civil penalty that they are assessed should be equal to or more than what it would have cost them to have a peer review, because then you've got people who could avoid the peer review. It's cheaper for them to pay the civil penalty than to have the peer review.
I think that's a great point.
And that, I will tell you that I don't think that this person's intentionally avoiding. From the history of the complaints that I have read, it's not an intentional avoidance. It's more of a, I'm trying to think of what the word, lack of attention.
What kind of practice, what kind of work are they doing if they've?
Listen,
Yeah,
and I am.
I understand. We need to get his attention, hers or
I
whatever.
agree wholeheartedly. I just wanted to make sure that there's a distinction between negligence and intentional acts, and I don't think that this person is intentionally avoiding peer review. I think there's just always something.
Chairman, I'll make the motion. If y'all disagree, you can vote it down. But that we modify slightly the recommendation from legal counsel that it's $1,000 a month until the date he either attests or sends an affidavit or declaration or something about when he submitted the information for the peer review.
Yeah, I heard. I'll do my best. And what may I make a suggestion is that we, it's $1,000 for the 3 months. Let's bifurcate it, so it's a solid $3,000 period. In addition, it is $1,000, and I don't really know anything about peer review other than what the rules of the law state. So, with regard to submitting it, I don't. If so long as that's entirely in his control, and that there's nothing in between being enrolled and having somebody else be involved. Like, you know, if someone said, "Well, I can't come and actually do the review until this particular date," and then we're end up hitting them with another $1,000. The submission is entirely from enrollment to submission. That's entirely under his control.
I mean, yeah, there are multiple peer reviewers in this state. He could call 20 to see who can do it tomorrow. And, you know, I find it hard to believe he could contact all reviewers and he couldn't find somebody to do it in the next week or two.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure that it was contingent upon him.
$1,000 a
In the
month
firm.
until that time, would that be a total penalty that would be more expensive than it would cost to do the peer review itself?
Most likely. It depends on the type of work he does, and I don't know that information.
Got some language in mind you'd like to use there, you want
I guess we would.
to come in after the final period,
Mhm.
plus an additional $1,000 for each month.
say from the date of enrollment until the date of submission, and then I would look to Wendy for the actual terminology submission of work paper. I mean, I don't know what you're submitting.
Until the date that all work papers are submitted to the administering entity.
That would be my motion.
All work papers are submitted to the reviewing entity.
Is that the peer reviewer that you're saying, submit it to the peer reviewer?
No, that would be, the report needs to be issued and submitted to the administering entity. So he would submit his documents to the peer reviewer, they would perform the peer review, and what we're holding him accountable for is an issued report and working papers from the reviewer to the administering entity.
Well, and that,
All of that, I don't think would be in his control, would it?
Not in his control.
so, until he submits proof that he submitted his work papers to the reviewer. Because the review, I don't know how long this is
As a
completely foreign to me.
reviewer, I mean, that's up to them how long they take.
So
And
the
then
item-
getting, yeah.
So some of the items you have to submit to the reviewer would be some checklists, the selected engagements.
Until all items necessary for the peer review to be submitted to the peer reviewing
Peer reviewer,
person.
yeah.
That way, in case there's
That's-
one item
that's
missing,
in
it's still.
that
How-
entity's control.
Yes, that's fine, that's fine.
Because to that point, it's within his control.
Right.
Yes. He can continue to stall it, but
But he could get it done.
yeah.
How do we word that in here? Legal counsel, are you gonna come
No,
up
he's
with
gonna-
wording, or?
He's going to draft the
I
motion.
think I can.
All right.
I will be in here at 7 a.m. tomorrow figuring that out.
Gonna sleep on it, huh?
Yeah.
In other words, he says he's getting hungry, Casey, moving on.
I'm always hungry.
Okay, case number 13, this one, I think I'll just let you take a minute and read the facts again. I mean, the, situation where a practitioner filed a deceased 2012 tax return, but did not file the 2013 return. The 2012 return was examined by the Internal Revenue Service. The respondent did not provide or respond to requests for information to help resolve the IRS issue. Penalties and interest for late filings. I think the complainant finally hired someone else to do the return, but to me, that really drives this thing home is all of the previous issues with this particular respondent. And the top of page 8, you can see when 2005, there was a complaint for lack of due professional care in a 2000 return. In 2009, it failed to file taxes in a timely manner for a client, which caused large penalties and interest. And 2014, failed to exercise due professional care in the filing of a 2012 estate tax return, which caused large penalties and interest. In addition, the respondent's firm, he was a co-owner, has also been disciplined by the board 3 previous times and not substandard report without a valid firm registration. 1999, there was a late renewal of the firm permit and CPA license. And to me, they had not been reviewed since 1994. That's 4 years. Failure to comply with the peer review program. And so you can read legal counsel's recommendation there, which I have done.
Mr. Stewart, if I may, I had a very difficult time coming up with what to do with this one. This is not an easy, this is why we have complaint process, I think. This is very difficult for me to calculate, figure out. I have spoken with the respondent last week and said, do you have any mitigating factors with which to present to the board? And there were none. I said, well, here's what I'm thinking. was this something that you would be considering? And he was not opposed to this particular line. Now, given the history, if the board chooses to do something different, by all means, you know, it's at your discretion. I'm so new, I just wasn't sure what to do, to be honest with you.
The only thing I would have a comment on is the item C on, I mean, with the history and repeat history, I don't know why you'd give him his license back in or give him the carrot to get his license back in 6 months.
Well,
Other than that's just to keep his practice alive, and maybe that's important to a lot of people if he's doing quality work.
quite frankly, I have mulled this over a fair amount. If we were to revoke his license, there is nothing that would prevent him from creating a new entity, you know, Glover Financial Services, and do taxes the very next day. And I was like, what is the best course of action that I can think of to wake this individual up? You know, a test, of course, he's not going to be able to do that if we revoke the license. But with the suspension, change of ownership of the firm is going to have to occur, change of all the letterhead, if there's a website, if there's a business card, And of course, item D, which I kind of enjoyed, is that the two investigators, that this guy's given carte blanche to the investigators to come by any time and check up and make sure that he is not doing anything he should not be doing. And
Is this the Full Employment Act?
I'm sorry?
Is this the Full-Time Employment Act?
You know, again, I don't know. You know, if we revoke his license, he falls out from underneath the jurisdiction of the board. There's no reason to keep him licensed, though.
The comments on that one, I mean, this is accounting ought to be practiced, but, comments?
Again, you know, he may choose not to do the consent order, and then we can have the formal hearing.
Okay, let's take cases 12, 13, and 14. I need a motion to approve legal counsel's recommendation on those with the caveat that we will make a modification to the penalty.
And, Mr. Stewart,
not
14 we had not reviewed yet.
14 had been renewed.
I moved on 12 or 13.
Well, excuse me, okay, excuse me, I'm sorry.
You're talking about.
13, I stand corrected, 12 and 13. And we will make a modification to the recommendation on case number 12. Wording to be provided by legal counsel.
I understand the gist. I'll try to do the best I can tomorrow morning.
Motion?
Second.
Second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, question, or case number 14, this is one where the complainant and the respondent have litigation going on between them, and because of that litigation, I think the recommendation of legal counsels, we just put this into litigation monitoring until such time as their personal litigation is resolved. Got a motion? Need a second?
Second.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Got two cases for representation, and case number 15, you've had to do the professional privilege tax, and you can read the information provided there, but basically the complaint. We had previously, I guess, approved the authority to settle via consent order. Based on the new facts, new information, legal counsels now recommend that the questions on that one. Case number 16.
Typo on number 15 up in that first paragraph where it says the license has been closed.
Number 15 on the new information or original information?
Second sentence, the first paragraph.
Yeah, I just copied and pasted from the old consent order, so that was my predecessor. But that is a typo.
It is a typo.
Well, it repeats her license.
Yeah, should it say her case has been closed?
No, I mean you can close out a license.
Close the license?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Mhm.
All right.
Okay, case number 16, and this is one where I think we went out to investigate. The respondent would not cooperate, provide any information, do what we asked, and we had basically a recommendation to close upon an issuance of a letter of warning. Last time, I think she has now responded by removing the words accountant or accounting from her website, so she's done what we've asked. She apparently is not a CPA, right? She's just was using the term accountant. So she's done what we've instructed her or told her she needs to do, and so legal questions on that. Okay,
She was contrary to the law, and normally if you go out and you say you got a problem because you're not in compliance, and they comply with us, that's where you close the complaint and go on with a letter of warning or whatever. Here, I don't know how many trips were made on it, but we've spent a lot of time. She was breaking the law, and they tried to ignore us and would not comply. I would think that there ought to be a civil penalty attached.
She is a
Because,
non-licensee and not a non-registered firm, and I'm not disagreeing with you whatsoever. But Mr. Butler, you were investigating this, right? And he sat there with her, and she took it all down and off of there.
I understand that, but the fact that was she not presented with the violation on the front end or sent a letter of it?
She was presented with the violation on the first time I went there, but I did not get to talk to her. I talked to her on the telephone, and she wanted to get a lawyer involved and all. And this is one you sent back to me, so I went back to her. And in this case, it was a combination of doing a state-specific ethics and going by and seeing her, so it wasn't like full-price travel. But I did have to travel back to talk to her, and I caught her in the office and sat down with her and explained to her what she needed to do, and she called up her web provider right there and made all the corrections as we read through it and went through it.
When was that? Yeah.
September, I think.
Have you visited the website since then to see if it's still going?
Yes, I did it before I finished my report to Ben. I visited the website, and the corrections had been made.
This particular line of this particular type of violation, I do believe we're going to be discussing tomorrow. It's the memo that we have handed out is in regards to this. So we would like to maybe, I don't know, can we table it until tomorrow, and then we can do whatever you want. I don't know
If I'm the only one that had a question, I'm not going to.
Does the committee
I'm
need
not
to
gonna
make,
push
I
it.
don't know, I mean, I'm so new, do they need to make a recommendation today, or could you alter it tomorrow? Certainly. Mm-hmm.
The board members that are going to be there tomorrow are here today.
Serve it like it is, and then we'll bring it up tomorrow if something changes.
You can change that. Okay, we'll entertain a motion that we approve legal counsel's recommendation of cases number 15, 16. Larry, aren't you on this committee?
Yeah, I think you all hadn't been voting. I'm sorry, I didn't think I was. Sorry.
Big time. Big chance to
I'm
make a
fine with
motion.
your recommendations. I was in agreement with everything you said.
Got a motion and a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Let's get out of here. Chairman, that concludes the legal report.
Very good. Wendy, do you want to introduce the topic that you've given us homework for?
Oh, okay. I gave you each a packet of information. The top of it is a memo from our attorney, Ben Glover, addressing some items that you all had discussed at the last meeting involving the terms accountant and accounting, how that is currently being interpreted within the rules, and maybe some issues that we're having with that. And following that memo is some suggested rule changes. They are of various kinds. Some of them are related to the memo, some are not. If you will make an effort to digest some of that information tonight, I think it'll be a healthy discussion tomorrow.
Great.
Please, by all means, feel free to make notes and questions, because Mr. Glandorf and I will be very happy to answer them tomorrow.
Just remind the board that we have you've seen the agenda. There is no lunch planned, so if you're interested in, we discussed various issues robustly today, so I'm not sure we need to go through them fully tomorrow, but we'll need to take formal board action, and we've got a lot of ground to cover. So
We do have some Panera bread that will be here in the morning, some bagels and coffee cake and coffee, juice.
share with the board your discovery of the food allowance for the State Board of Accountancy.
So I had Karen do a little research, because I believe that I was told that previously that it was maybe $7 a day.
$6 per person.
Per person per day that we were allotted to provide refreshments for the board, and that seemed awfully unreasonable, considering we thought we may have to have lunch tomorrow. And so Karen looked into it a little more for me and found that we were working on some very outdated information, and so we have been approved for plenty of refreshments tomorrow.
We always paid for our own lunch, and until last time, when Don paid for our breakfast, I think, they paid for it.
Yeah.
Or the
Can I
snacks.
make one statement on something that's on here, just for everybody to be thinking about, that I sent Wendy? There's a letter in here in your file from Joe Carcello. I hope everybody's read that. I don't know if we're going to discuss it tomorrow or not, but
Yes, we are definitely going to discuss it.
I don't know that we can do anything about it right now, but he's basically saying that all of the students at UT in the MAC program are basically going to Georgia to take the exam now, because we have this 200-day rule that's forcing them to go there because they want to take it sooner. And if they follow the Tennessee rule, they can't take the exam until they're in the second semester of the MAC program. So all the good students are going to Georgia taking the exam, and it's raising Georgia's exam scores way up, and it's killing Tennessee's because they're all going to Georgia. So there's a copy of his letter in here, and I think we're going to.
Yes, we will discuss it specifically tomorrow, and I've also included with that documents how other states are treating that, so it'll be some good information, I think.
Good. It's interesting. It's an interesting thing.
Everyone in the morning.